What happens when this best person in your life stops being just a friend and becomes the one you can't imagine living without? Ethan Brooks had spent 6 years telling himself that what he felt for Charlotte Sterling was nothing more than friendship. 6 years of Sunday mornings, of inside jokes, of watching her hold his daughter like she already belonged there. 6 years of lying to himself. Then a stranger called her his wife, and everything he had carefully buried came rushing up at once. If you've ever loved someone too much to risk losing them, stay with me. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The market smelled like old wood and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Ethan noticed it the moment they stepped off the sidewalk and into the rows of vendor stalls. That particular heaviness in the air, the kind that settles in your lungs and makes everything feel slightly suspended, like the world is holding its breath before something happens. He'd grown up in Chicago. He knew what that kind of sky meant. He just didn't say anything, because Charlotte was already 3 steps ahead of him, weaving through the crowd with the focused energy of someone who had nowhere else to be and every intention of making this trip count. "Ethan?" She didn't look back. "You're falling behind." "I'm carrying 2 bags and a lamp you haven't bought yet," he said. "Give me a second." "I haven't bought it yet," she called back. "That's the operative word." She disappeared around a display of reclaimed shelving, and Ethan shifted the canvas bags on his shoulder and followed, because that's what he did. That's what he always did. 6 years of friendship had taught him the rhythm of Charlotte Sterling's pace, and somewhere along the way he'd just stopped thinking about whether or not he kept up. He simply did. The Wicker Park Street Market ran every Sunday from April through October, tucked along a stretch of Milwaukee Avenue where the buildings still had that old Chicago bones feel. Brick facades, hand-painted signs, windows that fogged in winter and caught gold in summer. Today, in the second week of September, the light was doing that particular early fall thing where it lands differently on everything, softer and more honest than it ever manages in July. The trees were just starting to think about turning. The air smelled like roasted corn from a vendor 2 rows over and something cinnamon from a bakery whose awning Ethan clocked out of habit. A bakery he would remember later for reasons that had nothing to do with pastries. He caught up to Charlotte beside a stall that specialized in what the handwritten sign called curated vintage lighting, which was a polite way of saying someone had rescued 40 years of other people's rejected lamps from estate sales and arranged them on folding tables with little paper tags tied to their necks. Charlotte was standing in front of one of them with the look she got when she was trying to talk herself into or out of something. It was a very specific expression, jaw slightly set, eyes narrowed just enough, one hand resting loosely on the curve of her hip. Ethan had cataloged that expression over 6 years without ever consciously meaning to. The lamp she was looking at was green, not the elegant kind of green that interior designers name something like sage or forest mist. It was a genuine, unambiguous, aggressively committed green. A squat ceramic base with a shade the color of old copper left too long in the weather. It was objectively ugly in a way that almost circled back around to interesting. "Don't," Ethan said. "I didn't say anything." "You're making the face." Charlotte turned to look at him with an expression that was trying very hard to be offended. "I don't have a face." "You have 17 faces. This is face number 4. It means you've already decided and you want someone to either stop you or confirm the decision you made 30 seconds ago." She looked at him for a beat, then back at the lamp. "It would look good in the living room." "It's green. The walls are going to be white." "Charlotte, it's green." "Green is having a moment." "That lamp was having a moment in 1987, Ethan said. "That moment is over." She picked it up anyway, turning it slowly, tilting the shade to look at the inside of it. There was something careful and deliberate about the way she handled things she was considering buying. Not the carefulness of someone afraid to break something, but the carefulness of someone who was actually paying attention. Charlotte paid attention to things. It was one of the qualities that made her terrifying in a boardroom and occasionally exhausting everywhere else. "It has character," she said. "It has age spots. That's called patina. That's called wear and tear." She set it back down and looked at him sideways. "When did you become an interior designer?" "I'm not an interior designer. I'm the guy who's going to have to look at this lamp every time I come over." Something crossed her face at that, quick, there and gone, like a fish breaking the surface of water. He almost didn't catch it. He filed it away without quite examining it, the way you sometimes file things when you're not sure you want to know what they mean. "It's my apartment," she said, and her voice was normal, perfectly normal. "It is," Ethan agreed. "Buy the lamp. Live with the lamp. That's fine. I'm just saying." She tilted her head at him. "You're just saying what?" "That there's a perfectly good lamp 2 stalls over that's not going to look like it came from your grandmother's lake house." "My grandmother didn't have a lake house." "Mine did, and this lamp would have fit right in, right next to the ceramic owl collection." Charlotte laughed, a real laugh, not the polished one she deployed at charity events and business dinners. This was the one that involved her whole face and occasionally made her snort if something caught her truly off guard. It was the laugh Ethan was responsible for more than anyone else in her life, though neither of them had ever said so out loud. The vendor had been watching them the whole time, the way vendors at these markets learn to watch, patient, unobtrusive, tracking the conversation without appearing to track it. He was an older man, somewhere in his 70s, with a gray beard trimmed close to his jaw, and the unhurried manner of someone who'd been selling things long enough to know when a sale was happening and when it was just theater. He waited until their laughter settled, and then he smiled at both of them in the way that older people sometimes smile at younger people, like he was seeing something they couldn't quite see themselves. "The two of you," he said with a slight accent Ethan couldn't immediately place. "You have been together a long time, yes? A husband and wife who still make each other laugh. This is a rare thing." He said it warmly, the way you say something that seems obvious, a compliment wrapped in an observation, the kind of thing that expects a thank you or a modest deflection. Ethan's first instinct was purely reflex. 6 years of friendship had trained him to roll with social misreadings, and his brain had already processed the path of least resistance. Play along, smile, let the moment pass. "You caught us," he said, grinning, shifting the bags on his shoulder. 15 years of marriage and she still can't make a lamp decision." The vendor laughed. "A beautiful wife is worth the patience." "She is," Ethan said, easy, automatic. He was still smiling when he turned to look at Charlotte, expecting the sharp comeback she always had ready for these moments. The raised eyebrow, the dry correction, the joke that would cut the tension neatly in two and leave everyone laughing. She wasn't laughing. She was looking at him. He wasn't sure how to describe the expression on her face. He had cataloged 17 of her expressions, and this wasn't one of them. It was something quieter and more complicated than any of them, something that had gotten past the usual armor of wit and irony and was just sitting there in the open, undefended. It lasted less than 3 seconds. Then she looked back at the lamp. "I'll take it," she told the vendor, reaching for her purse. The sale took 4 minutes. Ethan helped wrap the lamp in paper while Charlotte handled the transaction with the brisk efficiency she brought to everything financial, the crisp handoff of the card, the brief exchange of pleasantries, the way she always thanked people who worked for their living with a directness that didn't have any performance in it. That was something he'd noticed early. Charlotte Sterling, who could command a conference room of 40 executives without raising her voice, was genuinely courteous to vendors at street markets. She tipped the man $10 more than necessary and told him the lamp was going into her new apartment. "A home should have things with stories," the old man said, handing Charlotte the carefully wrapped lamp. "It will," she said, and her voice was entirely steady. But when they turned away from the stall and walked back into the flow of the market, Ethan noticed that she wasn't talking. Charlotte Sterling, who could fill silence the way other people fill rooms, was walking beside him in quiet. Not the easy quiet they sometimes settled into. That was different. The quiet of two people who'd been in each other's lives long enough to not need to fill every second. This was the other kind, the kind that had weight. He let it sit. He was good at that, too. They made it another 20 minutes through the market. Charlotte picked up 2 small prints from an artist whose booth she'd visited before, and a set of hand-thrown ceramic bowls that she deliberated over for a long time without the usual running commentary. Ethan carried everything without being asked and kept pace without saying much, and watched her from the side of his vision the way he sometimes did when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She was beautiful. That wasn't a thought he examined often. It existed in a compartment he'd built early and kept firmly latched, because Charlotte's beauty was the kind of thing that, if you thought about it too directly, became a problem. She was tall and carried herself like someone who'd learned early that taking up space wasn't something that required an apology. Her hair was dark, and she usually wore it pulled back in a way that suggested she'd done it quickly, without caring much, though somehow it always looked precisely right. Her eyes were the particular brown that shifted in different light, coffee dark in shadow, amber where the sun caught them. She dressed the way she moved, without unnecessary decoration, but never without intention. Right now, under the increasingly gray Sunday sky, she looked like she was somewhere else. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey, what?" "You've gone somewhere." "I'm right here." She didn't look at him. "Charlotte?" "Ethan." "What happened back there?" Nothing happened. She stopped in front of a display of framed botanical prints without really seeing them. "A man made a wrong assumption. It happens." "You didn't do anything," Ethan said. "You always do something. The last time someone assumed we were together, you told them we were actually estranged business partners in a very contentious ongoing lawsuit." The corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. "That was funny." "It was very funny. What happened this time?" She picked up one of the botanical prints and turned it over, looking at the back of it. "I wasn't in the mood." "For jokes?" "For whatever." She put the print down. "Can we keep moving?" They kept moving. The sky had been threatening for 40 minutes when it finally made good on the threat. It started with the particular prickling on the back of the neck that always happens before rain, a shift in air pressure, a smell like wet concrete arriving before a single drop. Then the drops arrived, not gently, the way September rain in Chicago rarely bothers to be gentle. It came in a sheet, fast and indifferent, and within 30 seconds the market transformed from a casual Sunday scene into a scramble of vendors pulling tarps over merchandise and shoppers running for whatever shelter was closest. Ethan grabbed Charlotte's arm and pulled her under the nearest awning. It happened to belong to the bakery he'd clocked earlier. They were both damp at the shoulders and laughing slightly, the reflexive laughter of two people who'd just run 10 feet in the rain, which is a small thing, but somehow always funny. They stood under the green and white striped canvas and watched the market become a different place, vendors shouting to each other across the noise of water on canvas and the rumble of a sky doing what it had clearly been planning to do all morning. "Nice lamp," Ethan said. Charlotte held up the paper-wrapped bundle, which she'd somehow kept mostly dry by holding it under her jacket. "Don't." "I'm just saying, in addition to being green, it's now contributed to your entire right side being wet." "It was worth it." "Was it?" She looked at it, then at him. Something in her expression shifted, that quiet thing coming back. "Maybe." They were side by side under the awning, close the way you stand when space is limited and you've been friends long enough to not think about proximity. Someone from the bakery came to the door and offered them coffee, which Ethan accepted for both of them because Charlotte was still holding the lamp and looking at the rain. He paid for both cups. Another thing that had simply become habit. The easy financial equity of their friendship. The way they'd negotiated the small logistics of shared time over 6 years without a system or agreement, just instinct. He handed her a paper cup. She took it without looking at him. "You're going to make me ask," Ethan said. "I'm not making you do anything." Charlotte. "What?" "Look at me for a second." She looked at him. That was all it took, the directness of it, his eyes finding hers and not moving away. Whatever she'd been holding back all morning moved visibly across her face, and he saw it happen, and she saw him see it, and there was a half-second where she could have deflected and chose not to. "It's stupid," she said. "Okay. I'm being ridiculous." "You're the least ridiculous person I know, which is saying something because you own 5 properties and once argued with me for 20 minutes about whether a jar of jam qualified as a gift. It does not qualify as a gift. It's still an ongoing debate." He kept his eyes on her. "Tell me." She looked back at the rain. She held the coffee cup with both hands, steam rising between her fingers. When she spoke at the rain rather than at him, which is how people say the true things they've been keeping. "When he said that word," she said, and her voice was careful, level. "When he said wife, I just—" She stopped, started again. I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have a joke. I couldn't find one, and I always have one. And I just stood there like someone had, she exhaled, like someone had said something that was too close. Ethan was quiet. Too close to what? He asked, and his voice was quiet too. The rain kept going. The market noise continued around them. Somewhere behind them in the bakery, something was in an oven and making the air smell like butter and warm bread. A woman ran past under a coat held over her head, laughing into her phone. The world was being entirely normal while Ethan stood on the edge of something and waited. Charlotte looked at him. "You know," she said. "I don't want to assume," he said, because he didn't. Because assuming felt like something he couldn't take back, and right now his heart was doing something unsteady in his chest, and he needed to hear it from her directly, needed the words to be hers. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that he could see the thing she was deciding. "I've been trying not to feel this for a while," she said finally, "and I'm good at things I put my mind to. I'm genuinely excellent at most things, but I've been bad at this." She glanced down at the coffee cup. "I think I've been bad at this for longer than I want to admit." "Charlotte, don't." The word came out sharp, reflex, then softer. "Don't do the thing where you're nice about it and we pretend it's fine, and then next Sunday it's like I never said anything. I can't do that again." "What do you mean again?" She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she was looking at the rain, not at him. "I have never in my life wanted to not feel something as much as I have wanted to not feel this," she said, "because I know what it costs if I'm wrong. You're—" She stopped. "I'm what?" "You're it, Ethan." Her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. "You've been it for a while. And that's a terrible position to be in when you can't tell if you're just someone's best friend or something else entirely, and the stakes are—" She gestured vaguely. "Hi." He didn't say anything for a moment. In the silence, he thought about his daughter, Lily, 5 years old and already possessing strong opinions about everything from breakfast cereal to the correct way to hold a crayon. He thought about how Charlotte had shown up at his apartment with a stuffed giraffe the week after he'd brought Lily home for the first time 6 years ago, and sat on his kitchen floor at 10 o'clock at night while he tried to figure out a bottle warmer, and neither of them had any idea what they were doing. He thought about how she'd come back the next night, and the night after that, and at some point it had just stopped being a special occasion and started being what they did. He thought about how many times he'd started to say something and then found a reason not to. How easy it had been to reach for friendship as the label. How much safer it was. "I moved across the city when I bought the first building," Charlotte said. Her voice had steadied. She'd made a decision to say it, and she was going to say it all the way. "You drove the truck. You and Lily brought me a housewarming plant. Do you remember that?" "The cactus," Ethan said, "because you told me you couldn't keep anything alive." "I still have that cactus." She looked at him. "I almost didn't want to tell you that." "How stupid is that? I've been cataloging things, all these things, all this time, and I just—" She pressed her lips together. "I don't know what to do with it." "When did it start?" He wasn't entirely sure why he was asking, maybe because he wanted to know, maybe because knowing would help him understand his own timeline. "I think I knew somewhere around the second year," she said. "After the Riverside thing fell through and I was a mess about it. And you drove 40 minutes in traffic just to sit on my porch with me for 2 hours. And you didn't even ask what was wrong. You just brought soup." Her voice caught on the memory. She recovered quickly. Charlotte always recovered quickly. "I think that's probably when I knew. Which means I've been managing this for 4 years, and I am very good at management, and I am very tired." The rain was still falling. Ethan set his coffee cup down on a dry section of the awning frame and turned to face her fully. "Charlotte." "You don't have to say anything." Her voice was careful again, controlled. "I'm an adult. I know how to—" "I'm not done." She stopped. He looked at her the way he always looked at her when he needed her to actually hear what he was saying, directly, without the social buffer that people usually keep deployed. "I didn't know what," he said. "I mean, I think I knew something. In the way you know something and don't look at it directly because looking at it directly changes things. I've been doing that." Her face had gone very still. "And I can't tell you right now that everything is clear, and I figured everything out, he said, because he was trying to be honest in the way that actually counted, not just in the way that sounded good. But I can tell you that the best thing about any given week is when I see you, and that when something good happens, my first thought is that I want to tell you, and that Lily, his voice shifted slightly, the way it always shifted when he talked about his daughter. Lily asked me last month if Charlotte was going to come to her birthday party, and when I said yes, she said good because she's basically already family. And I stood in the kitchen for 5 minutes trying to figure out what to do with that. Charlotte's eyes were bright. Not crying, just present. Completely present in a way that felt almost strange when he was used to her being 5 steps ahead of every room. "What did you do with it?" she asked. "I called you about something else," he said. "Because I'm a coward." She almost laughed. "You're not a coward." I was about this. The rain was tapering. It wasn't gone yet, but the heavy weight of it was easing into something lighter, the kind that would stop within 10 minutes and leave everything cleaner than it was before. "I don't know what this is supposed to look like," Ethan said. "You're my best friend. You're the person I call. The person who knows everything about my life and still shows up, which is..." He exhaled. "That's not a small thing." "No," she agreed quietly. "And I have Lily, and that's not separate from anything. That's the whole thing. Whoever is in my life is in her life, and I've never..." He stopped, reorganized. "I've never brought anyone home because nobody ever felt like they fit, and I didn't understand that for a long time. I thought I was being too careful, being too protective." "You weren't wrong to be careful." "Maybe. But maybe I was also just waiting for something that already existed." He looked at her. "That's an uncomfortable thing to realize." "Very," she said. "Yeah." He ran a hand across the back of his neck. The nervous gesture, the one he always made when he was saying something he couldn't take back. "I'm not doing this perfectly." "I genuinely do not care about perfect," Charlotte said. "I've spent my entire professional life optimizing for perfect, and I am done with it. I just want to know where we are." "Where we are," he repeated. "Yeah." He looked at her, this woman he'd known for 6 years, who had shown up in his life at a time when everything was uncertain and unmoored, and had simply remained steady and complicated and real. Who argued with him about lamps and remembered how he took his coffee and had kept a cactus alive for 5 years because he'd brought it. Who had just told him the most honest thing anyone had told him in recent memory. In the rain, under a bakery awning, holding a green lamp wrapped in paper. "I think," Ethan said slowly, "that we might be somewhere different than we thought." She studied him. "How different?" He didn't answer right away. The rain stopped. Not dramatically. It didn't have a clear ending moment. Just gradually became not rain, the way most things that have been going on for a while simply quiet down without ceremony. The market sounds came back in. Vendors started pulling back tarps. A couple walked past them with a shared umbrella they no longer technically needed. "I think," Ethan said again, and he was choosing his words with more care than usual, "that I've been in this for longer than I told myself I was. And I think the reason none of the other things worked was because..." He looked at her. "Because I already had something that was working, and I didn't let myself see it that way." Charlotte was quiet for a long time. "That's a lot to say under an awning," she said finally. "I know. In the rain. It stopped. It did." She looked at the street, at the wet cobblestones reflecting the sky, which had lightened to a thin, milky gray. "I've spent the better part of 4 years convincing myself that the friendship was enough, and that wanting more was a weakness. It's not a weakness. I know that now. I knew it in theory before." She looked at the lamp in her hands. "I named him, by the way." Ethan blinked. "The lamp." "Gerald." "You named the lamp Gerald." "He looks like a Gerald." Ethan looked at the wrapped lamp and then at her. Something moved in his chest, something that had been there, he now understood, for a very long time. "Charlotte." "Yeah. I don't have a clean answer for you today. I want to be honest about that." "I know. But I'm not brushing past what you just said. I'm not going to make a joke and move on. That's not what this is." She held his gaze. Okay, he agreed, They stood there for another moment, not kissing, not making any declaration, not resolving anything cleanly, just standing under a bakery awning on a wet Sunday in September in Chicago, holding coffee cups that had gone lukewarm, with a green lamp named Gerald between them, understanding that something had shifted and that they were going to have to figure out what that meant. "Should we get lunch?" Ethan said. Charlotte looked at him. Then she looked at the market, which was slowly reconstituting itself as the rain receded, then back at him. "Yeah," she said. "Let's get lunch." They walked out from under the awning together, side by side, the way they always did, but not exactly the way they always had. The sky was pale and wet, and the light was doing that thing it does after rain, where everything looked slightly more real than it did before. The lamp was still green. Charlotte was still Charlotte. Ethan was still Ethan, still carrying too many bags, still not quite sure what happened next. But he was, for the first time in a long time, not pretending he didn't feel something. That felt, for now, like enough. Lunch was at a Vietnamese place 2 blocks from the market that neither of them had planned on. They'd walked past it, and Charlotte had stopped and said this, and Ethan had followed her in without argument because that was also habit. And habit was, he was learning, a more complicated thing than it seemed. The restaurant was small and warm and slightly louder than conversation required. They were seated at a table near the window where the glass was still beaded with the last of the rain, and a woman who looked like she'd been running the place for 30 years brought them tea without asking and menus she clearly didn't expect them to need for long. The kind of place that didn't try too hard because it didn't have to. Ethan looked at his menu. He was not reading his menu. He was aware, in the specific way you become aware of things after a conversation has changed the room's temperature, that Charlotte was sitting across from him and they were doing the very ordinary thing of being at lunch, and that nothing about this was ordinary anymore. Charlotte was reading her menu, or she was doing what he was doing and using the menu as a reasonable excuse to look at something that wasn't him. "Pho," she said. "Yeah," he said. "You weren't even looking." "I always get pho." "You got bun bo hue last time." He looked up. "You remember that?" She set the menu down. "I remember a lot of things." The woman came back and they ordered pho for Ethan, a vermicelli bowl for Charlotte, spring rolls to share. And the practical business of ordering food created a minute of normal that they both seemed grateful for. When the woman left, the quiet came back. And it was the weighted kind again, not the easy kind. And Ethan decided they'd both had enough of navigating around it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask me anything. That's been true for 6 years." "Did Marcus know?" Charlotte's expression shifted. Marcus Hale, her most recent ex, a portfolio manager she'd dated for 8 months the year before last, was not a name Ethan brought up often, because Charlotte had been the one to end it, and she generally didn't revisit things she'd closed. She looked at the table for a moment, then at him. "No," she said. "I made sure he didn't." "How?" "I was very careful about what I said when your name came up. I talked about you the way you talk about a friend." She picked up her tea. Present tense, matter of fact. "Ethan and I went to the market. Not the way I actually thought about it." "Which was what?" She looked at him steadily. "Which was that every time I came home from seeing you, I was in a slightly better mood than I'd been in all week, and that I was aware of that, and that I did not want Marcus to be aware of it." "That's—" Ethan paused. "That's a hard thing to carry. It wasn't great." "Is that why it ended?" She set the cup down. "It ended because Marcus wanted something I wasn't giving him. He didn't know why I wasn't giving it to him. He thought I was emotionally unavailable, which is, he wasn't wrong, just about the reason." Ethan absorbed this. He turned his own cup slowly in both hands, a habit he had when he was processing something. "I didn't know that." "I know you didn't. That was the point." "Charlotte, I wasn't—" She stopped, started again, carefully. "I wasn't trying to manipulate anything. I wasn't hoping that if I waited long enough you'd magically figure out that you had feelings too. I just couldn't be with someone while having this in the background, and I also couldn't say anything about the background because I didn't know what you felt, and I was not willing to blow up the best friendship I've ever had on a guess." She looked at him directly. "That felt like the rational choice." "Was it?" She thought about it genuinely. "I don't know. I was lonely sometimes with Marcus, which is a specific kind of bad. The spring rolls arrived. They both reached for the plate at the same time, fingers brushing briefly in the way that happens 100 times between two people over 6 years without ever meaning anything or meaning everything, and neither of you saying so. They both pulled back. Charlotte looked at the spring rolls. Ethan looked at Charlotte. "Sorry," he said. "Don't be stupid," she said, and took one. He took one, ate it. It was good. His appetite had returned somewhere between the bakery awning and this table, which he took as a sign that something had released. "Can I ask you something now?" Charlotte said. "Yeah." "Sarah." He knew immediately which Sarah. Sarah Voss, the woman he'd dated for 4 months 2 years ago, the only relationship he'd attempted since Lily that had gotten anywhere close to serious. He talked about Sarah to Charlotte, and Charlotte had been completely normal about it, and the relationship had ended anyway, and he told himself it was because of timing and Lily's schedule and the general complexity of single-parent dating. He looked at Charlotte. "What about her, Chet?" he said, though he was starting to understand what about her. "Why did that end?" Charlotte said. "Really?" He was quiet for a moment, honest quiet, the kind where the answer is actually forming rather than the kind where you're deciding whether to give it. "She said I wasn't present," he said finally. Charlotte waited. She said that when we were together, she could tell I was thinking about something else. Or someone else. He paused. She didn't say who. She was too kind for that. She just said she could feel a distance, and that she'd been hoping it would close, and it hadn't. The table was very quiet. "I told myself she was reading things wrong," Ethan said. "That I was just tired. That single parenting does that to you. That it wasn't personal. But she wasn't..." He exhaled. "She wasn't wrong, was she?" "I don't know," Charlotte said. "I wasn't there." "No." He looked at her. "But you were, in a way." She didn't say anything. She was very still. "I think I've been..." He stopped. Tried again. "I think I made a rule for myself a long time ago that said you were a friend, and that category was locked, and I was very disciplined about that rule. And I think the reason I was so disciplined about it is because somewhere underneath it, I understood that if I ever questioned it, the whole thing would become a lot more complicated very quickly." "So you just didn't question it?" "I'm good at not questioning things I've decided." "I know," Charlotte said. "I've watched you do it with your lease renewal, your car situation, and the coffee maker that's been broken for 8 months. The coffee maker is Ethan. It has 2 settings. Neither of them is the correct temperature. It makes coffee. It makes grief in a cup. Despite everything, or maybe because of everything," he laughed. It was sudden and genuine, and he saw her face do something when he laughed, something she didn't quite manage to arrange away before he caught it. She looked at him the way people look at things they are trying very hard not to love more than is practical. "You're always funnier when I'm not expecting it," he said. "Don't get used to it. I'm going to go back to being professionally difficult now." "You've never been difficult." "I'm famously difficult. My assistant has a document." "Your assistant has a document about everything. She's very organized." "She's a gift. I've been consistently awful to her for the first 6 months of every job, and she has outlasted all of it." Charlotte said this without apology, because she was self-aware enough to know it was true and honest enough to say so. She pulled a piece of the spring roll apart. "I'm not easy to work with." "No," Ethan agreed. "Or be around half the time. Half the time is a generous figure." "Ethan." "I'm kidding." He paused. 30%. She threw a napkin at him. He caught it, grinning, and the moment opened up between them the way moments always did. The teasing and the history and the 6 years of accumulated shorthand making everything feel both completely normal and entirely shifted, like furniture rearranged in a familiar room. Same objects, different light. You keep almost reaching for something in the wrong place. The Fio arrived. They ate. For a while it was easier, in the way that eating together always makes things easier, because it gives your hand something to do and your mouth a reason to not be required to speak. Ethan watched the rain-wet street outside the window. A dog on a leash was making extremely complex decisions about where to step. A woman was reading something on her phone while walking, which Ethan felt was optimistic in September in Chicago. Tell me about when you moved in with your ex-wife, Charlotte said. Ethan looked up from his foe. It was an unexpected direction, and he was aware that she knew it was unexpected and was doing it deliberately, getting at something sideways, the way she did when she didn't want to announce the question before it landed. Why? He said. Because I want to understand something and I don't want to assume. He leaned back slightly. Rachel. He didn't talk about Rachel often, not because it was a wound that hadn't healed. It had healed, mostly, in the complicated, incomplete way these things do, but because it was a story he'd told himself so many times it had gotten simplified. What do you want to understand? Did you love her? Of course I loved her. Were you in love with her? He was quiet. When you moved in, Charlotte said, were you in love with her, or were you in a place in your life where you needed someone and she was there and she was good and you told yourself the rest of it would come? The directness of it was slightly startling. Charlotte had always had that quality, the ability to cut to the actual question without apologizing for it. He'd always respected it. He was slightly less comfortable being on the receiving end of it. I think, he said slowly, that I cared about her genuinely, and I think I wanted it to be more than it was, and I tried hard to get it there, and I thought Lily would... He stopped. I thought becoming parents together would close whatever gap there was, that it would make something into what I wanted it to be. It didn't. Nothing works that way. He said it plainly, without bitterness. That was one thing the last 6 years had given him, a pretty clear-eyed view of what had happened with Rachel, which was that two people who cared about each other had tried to make something more than they had, and it hadn't worked, and they'd both had to find a way to remain good parents to Lily in the aftermath. That had taken effort. Rachel lived in Minneapolis now. Lily went up for long weekends twice a year and for most of July. It was a functional arrangement that had taken a couple of difficult years to build, and he was grateful for it. And it was also a daily reminder of what happens when you try to grow something in the wrong soil. So when she left, Charlotte began, she didn't leave. We agreed it wasn't working, roughly simultaneously, which made it both easier and harder. He looked at his bowl. She said once, near the end, that she felt like she was always the one trying to get my attention, even when I was in the same room. That there was a part of me that was somewhere else, and she'd been waiting for it to show up, and she was tired. He paused. That's almost word for word what Sarah said 2 years later. The table was quiet again. Two women, Charlotte said carefully, who are both very different people, saying the same thing to you. Yeah, Ethan, I know. That's not a coincidence. I know. He looked at her. I'm not slow. I was protecting something. I thought I was protecting myself. And Lily, I thought I was being careful. He held her gaze. I think I was being careful about you. Something moved across Charlotte's face. She didn't look away. What do you mean careful about me? I mean that I think some part of me understood that this... He gestured slightly helplessly at the space between them. This was the thing that mattered, and that you don't gamble with the thing that matters. You protect it. You don't look at it directly because what if you look and it's not what you thought? And then you've lost both the friendship and the thing you hoped for. And then what? So you looked at other things instead. So I looked at other things instead. He exhaled. And then two people told me I was somewhere else. Charlotte was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the woman came to refill their tea and left again, and a family at the table across from them had a small argument about a shared appetizer. I did the same thing, Charlotte said finally. Not with someone in my personal life. I did it with work. Tell me. She turned her teacup. Every time something became uncomfortable, emotionally. When I noticed I was thinking about you too much, or when something happened and you were the first person I wanted to call and I had to actively choose not to call you because it was 11 at night and the reason I wanted to call was not a practical reason. She paused. I would go back to work. I would start a new project. I'd look at acquisition targets or renovation plans or quarterly projections, things that had clear metrics, things where I could measure whether I was doing well or doing badly. And were you doing well? I built 3 successful businesses in 4 years, Charlotte said. Professionally, I was exceptional. So yes, as a coping mechanism, work is very effective. right up until the moment when the market is closed and it's Sunday and you're standing in a rain shower next to the person you've been not calling for 8 months and an old man calls him your husband. Ethan looked at her. That's not sustainable, he said. No, she agreed. It isn't. Charlotte. He said her name the way he sometimes did when he needed her to understand he was being serious. Not performatively serious, but the actual kind. I need you to know something. She looked at him with the careful attention she reserved for conversations that counted. Whatever this is, he said, whatever we're figuring out, I'm not going to let it sit in the background and then act like you didn't say it. I know I said I don't have a clean answer today. That's still true. But I need you to understand that this isn't something I'm going to file away and avoid. Okay, she said quietly. And I need you to understand that the reason this matters is because you matter. Not the friendship, not the comfortable arrangement of things. You, specifically. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked down at her bowl, and when she looked back up, her eyes were still bright and still not crying, but there was something less guarded in her face than he was used to. You're making this very hard to be composed about, she said. Good, he said. You're too composed. I'm never too composed. You absolutely are. You once got a phone call mid-sentence that your Riverside deal had collapsed, and you said, hold on to me, took the call, renegotiated the entire term structure while I was standing there, hung up, and then said, sorry, where were we? That was efficient. It was mildly alarming. You were impressed. I was both, he said honestly. I've been both for 6 years. She looked at him. Both what? Impressed and, he stopped, chose. Completely gone on you. I just wasn't calling it that. The restaurant did not stop existing. The family at the next table did not pause their appetizer dispute. The dog on the street, who Ethan could no longer see but felt philosophically present, was presumably still negotiating the post-rain sidewalk. The world continued being the world, ordinary and indifferent, while Charlotte Sterling looked at Ethan Brooks across a Vietnamese restaurant table with 6 years of something finally sitting in the open air between them. Completely gone, she said, testing the words, seeing how they sounded. Yeah, he said. I know the timing of that statement is, it's not ideal. I don't have a plan, I'm not trying to make a declaration when I can't back it up with certainty. I don't need certainty, Charlotte said. I need honesty. She paused. Which you just gave me. Yeah. She exhaled slowly. This is very strange. Completely. We've had lunch about 300 times. Probably more. And it's never been like this. No, he agreed. But I think some version of this has always been there. We were just organized about ignoring it. She almost smiled. I was very organized. You're the most organized person I've ever met. And yet here we are. Here we are, he said. They finished eating. The conversation shifted, as it always did, between the weight of things and the ordinary. Charlotte mentioned a permit issue with the new apartment's renovation. Ethan talked about Lily's upcoming school project that required, inexplicably, a working model of the solar system made from recycled materials, and they spent 4 minutes debating whether a tennis ball could credibly represent Jupiter, which it could not, but Ethan was committed to the premise. By the time the bill arrived, they had resolved nothing and said everything that needed saying for now, and that was the particular equilibrium they arrived at when the restaurant had been going for 2 hours and the window had dried and the Sunday outside was settling into afternoon. Ethan paid before Charlotte could reach for her wallet. She let him. She usually didn't. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. I was thanking you for the meal. I know. He held her gaze. Don't thank me. She understood. She nodded once. They walked out together into a city that had been washed clean by rain, the wet pavement reflecting everything in it. Other buildings, the gray sky going pale and pink at its edges, the outline of people moving through the afternoon on their various errands, living their various Sundays. The market had mostly packed up. A few vendors were still loading vans. The green and white bakery awning hung still in the windless air. Charlotte was carrying Gerald. Ethan noticed this, that she'd carried the wrapped lamp through lunch, had set it beside her chair with the same particular care she'd shown at the vendor's table, had picked it up again when they left without drawing attention to it. He didn't say anything about it. They walked to where Ethan had parked, which was 3 blocks away, and he put Charlotte's other bags in the back of his car and then stood with her on the sidewalk in the specific way that people stand when they're not ready to go but don't have a good reason to stay. "I need to pick Lily up at 4, he said. "She's been at her friend Piper's place." "How's Piper?" Charlotte asked, because she knew Piper by name and by the fact that Piper had a hamster named Tortellini and a very specific opinion about the color yellow that Lily had reported in detail. "Tortellini is fine, last I heard," Ethan said. Charlotte smiled. "The real one." "Good. You should come to dinner," Ethan said. "Tonight. Nothing. It doesn't have to be anything. Lily would want to see you, she's been asking, and I can cook. I'll make that chicken thing." "The one with the olives." "The one with the olives." Charlotte looked at him. He could see her doing the calculation, the same one she'd been doing for 4 years probably, the one that weighed what she wanted against what was safe. He could see the exact moment she stopped calculating. "Yeah," she said. "Okay." "Okay," he said. She shifted Gerald under her arm. 6:30? 6:30. They stood there for another moment, doing nothing in particular. Then Charlotte turned and walked toward her own car, which was parked around the corner, and Ethan stood beside his and watched her go. And when she turned the corner, he stood there for another few seconds by himself. He pressed his hand flat against the roof of his car. It was still slightly damp from the rain. 6 years. 6 years of every Sunday, of her number first in his phone contacts, of knowing what she ordered at every restaurant they'd ever been to together, of watching her build something and then build something else, and never stop building while also somehow always making time for him and Lily, for Tuesday phone calls that lasted an hour longer than they needed to, for being the only person who could tell when he was lying about being fine. He'd told himself a story about what that was for 6 years. Today, in the rain, in a restaurant, on a wet sidewalk. The story had stopped making sense. He got in his car. He sat for a moment without starting it. He looked at the empty passenger seat where Charlotte had been for about 40 Sunday markets, sitting with bags piled in her lap because the back seat had become Lily's permanent habitat of booster seat and forgotten drawing supplies and the perpetual mystery of one small shoe. He started the car. He had a chicken thing to make, with olives. He had 4 hours and a 5-year-old to pick up, and a dinner to put together. He had a life that was full and complicated and not particularly simple on its best days. And Charlotte was coming at 6:30. He pulled out into traffic and found himself doing something he hadn't done in a long time. He didn't turn on the radio. He just drove, in the particular silence of someone who has realized they're at the beginning of something rather than the middle of what they thought they already understood, and that the difference between those two positions is considerable, and that the only reasonable response to that is to be quiet for a while and let it be true. The city moved around him. The sky went from washed pale to genuine Sunday evening gold at its edges. He drove. He picked Lily up at 4:15, which was 15 minutes late because the parking situation on Piper's Street was its usual impossible self, and he'd had to circle twice. Lily was standing on the front porch with her backpack on when he pulled up, which meant she'd been ready for a while and was doing the thing she did when she'd been waiting, the particular posture of a 5-year-old who has decided to be patient but wants you to know it is costing her something. "You're late," she said when he got to the porch steps. 15 minutes, he said. "That's a lot." "It's not that much." It felt like a lot. She came down the steps and took his hand with the automatic ease of someone who had been doing this specific motion for as long as she could remember. Her backpack was pink with a fox on it, and one of the straps had a small tear that Ethan kept meaning to fix and hadn't. Her sneakers were slightly muddy from the rain. She smelled like another family's house, that particular smell of different soap, different air, someone else's cooking. "Piper and I made a fort," she announced. "How was the fort?" "Good. Then it fell down. Then we made it again." She considered this. The second one was better. "Fortitude." "What?" "Nothing. How's Tortellini?" Lily's face did the thing it always did when Tortellini came up, a specific complex emotion that combined genuine affection for someone else's pet with the ongoing negotiations she'd been conducting for 8 months about whether they could get their own. He was running in his wheel a lot. Piper says he does that when he's happy. Smart hamster. Can we? No. You don't even know what I was going to say. You were going to say, can we get a hamster? Lily looked up at him with the expression of someone whose long game had been interrupted. I was going to say, can we get pizza? No, you weren't. I was thinking both things at the same time. He buckled her into the back seat, and she immediately located the one small shoe that had been living on the floor for 11 days and held it up like evidence. I found it, she said. Great, he said. Do you know where the other one is? She looked at the shoe, then at the floor, then at him in the rearview mirror. No. He drove. Lily narrated the afternoon in the self-edited, non-linear way that 5-year-olds narrate things, beginning in the middle of something that had happened before lunch, circling back to a detail about Piper's older brother, who was apparently very annoying, then forward again to the fort construction and its structural failures. Ethan listened and responded in the appropriate places and watched the road and thought about Charlotte, which was not new, but the way he was thinking about her was. Is Charlotte coming over? Lily asked, apropos of nothing, from the back seat. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Tonight? Yeah, for dinner. I knew it, Lily said, with the profound satisfaction of someone whose prediction has come true. You didn't know anything, Ethan said. I just told you. I knew you were going to say yes when I said you were late and you didn't argue that much. He looked at her in the mirror again. You're 5. Almost 6. Almost 6, he agreed, because her birthday was in 7 weeks and she'd been tracking it with the precision of an air traffic controller. How does being almost 6 explain? Charlotte makes you not grumpy? Lily said simply. So when you're not grumpy, I know she's coming. He did not have a useful response to that. He drove the rest of the way home in a slightly different kind of silence than the one he'd driven to pick her up in, which was the silence of a man who has just been accurately diagnosed by someone who isn't old enough for kindergarten yet. He made the chicken thing, the one with the olives, a recipe he'd pulled from a cooking show years ago and had made often enough that he no longer needed to look it up, which was how he knew it was actually in his repertoire rather than aspirationally in it. It was not a difficult recipe. It involved a cast iron pan and some patience and a specific moment where you had to resist the urge to move the chicken around and just let it sit and develop color. He had burned it exactly twice in 3 years. Both times had involved Charlotte calling mid-cook. Lily sat at the kitchen counter doing something with colored pencils and a large piece of paper that she periodically held up to show him, soliciting opinions that she did not necessarily intend to incorporate. The radio was on low. The apartment smelled like browning chicken and garlic and the particular October-approaching smell of a Chicago apartment with its windows cracked, the outdoor air just starting to carry that specific edge of coming cold. What is that? Ethan asked, when Lily held up the paper for the 4th time. The solar system, she said, with the gravity of someone presenting completed work. He looked at it. Where's Jupiter? The yellow circle. He looked at it more carefully. There were 11 circles. Lily, there are 8 planets. I know, I added some. You can't just add planets. They're dwarf planets, she said firmly. We learned about them. There are a lot of dwarf planets, they just don't always count them. They count them, they just don't call them. You know what? Fine. The yellow circle is Jupiter? And the orange one next to it. That's also Jupiter? That's Enceladus. Enceladus is a moon. Lily looked at him with the particular patience of someone who finds the adults in her life frequently behind the times. It has water under the ice, Dad. I put it in. He turned back to the chicken. He did not have the scientific standing to argue about Enceladus. Fair enough, he said. Charlotte arrived at 6:27. Not 6:30, 6:27, because Charlotte had a relationship with punctuality that expressed itself as arriving slightly early and calling it on time, which Ethan knew and had factored into everything for years. He heard her key in the lock. She had a key because of a plumbing emergency 3 years ago when Ethan had been at a work site and she'd needed to let the repair guy in, and they'd never quite gotten around to discussing whether she should give it back, which had resolved itself by her still having it, and then the door, and then Lily's voice from the counter. Charlotte! Hey, Bug. The sound of Charlotte dropping something by the door, the specific thud of her bag, and then footsteps, And then Lily was off the stool and attached to Charlotte's waist with the confidence of someone who has never in their life had to wonder whether they were welcome. Charlotte's hand went to the back of Lily's head automatically, the same motion every time, thumb brushing the fine hair at the crown. "What are you making?" "The solar system. I added Enceladus." "The moon?" "It has water," Lily said. "It does," Charlotte agreed. "Good call." She looked up from Lily and found Ethan at the stove, and the look between them was brief and understood. She was checking whether the thing from this afternoon was still real, or whether the ordinary machinery of his apartment and his daughter and dinner had settled it back into the usual category. He answered the look by holding it a second longer than usual, which was an answer, and she looked back at Lily's solar system without any visible reaction that would mean something to a 5-year-old. "How's the chicken?" she said. "It's not burned." "That's the bar you're setting." "It's a solid bar." She came around the counter and stood beside him at the stove, looking into the cast iron pan with the critical assessment she brought to most things. She was wearing the same clothes from the market: dark jeans, a gray sweater that had gotten slightly damp at the shoulder from the rain and dried without needing any attention. She smelled like the outside and something faint and clean that he had never managed to identify and had stopped trying to. "You put too many olives," she said. "There's no such thing as too many olives." "I can see 12 olives." "You counted?" "I estimated." She took the wooden spoon from where it rested on the pan handle and adjusted something, very slightly, in the arrangement of things. 12 is too many." "Give me that." He took the spoon back. She stepped away, but only by about a foot, because the kitchen wasn't large and there was no particular reason to create distance just for the sake of it. That had always been true. That had never been something they'd thought about. He was thinking about it now. "Solar system update," Lily announced from the counter, holding up the paper. "I added a ring to Saturn." "Beautiful," Charlotte said. "I used gold for it because we were out of yellow." Inspired choice. Ethan looked at Charlotte in his peripheral vision, the way she responded to Lily, which had always been this way, easy and direct, without the slightly modified register that some adults used with children, that slightly louder, slightly simplified version of themselves. Charlotte talked to Lily the way she talked to everyone, adjusted for topic but not for condescension, and Lily had responded to this from the beginning with the unequivocal loyalty of someone who has decided that a person is the real thing. Dinner was ready at 7. They ate at the kitchen table, which still had Lily's solar system on it, because there was nowhere else to put it that wouldn't risk the gold Saturn ring before the pencil fully set. Lily ate approximately half of what was on her plate and talked approximately twice as much as anyone else at the table, which was the usual ratio, and Charlotte asked her questions with the genuine interest of someone who actually wanted the answers, which was also usual, and nothing about any of it was different from 40 other Sunday dinners, except that Ethan couldn't stop noticing things he'd always seen without noticing them. The way Charlotte tilted her head when Lily said something unexpected, the way she used her fork, left-handed, which he'd known for years, but had never thought about as a thing he knew. The way she'd taken the seat she always took on the left side of the table because the right side faced the window at an angle that got the overhead light badly, and he'd mentioned this once, 2 years ago, and she'd simply moved and never sat on that side again. He knew everything about how she existed in his space. He'd been collecting information about her for 6 years without filing it under anything that had a name. After dinner, Lily required 2 stories. Not 1, the usual number, but 2, because she had recently developed a negotiating position wherein if she could demonstrate that she wasn't tired by being very articulate about why she needed a second story, this would constitute grounds for the second story, which was circular but effective. Charlotte took the first story because Lily had selected a book that required different voices, and she'd assigned Charlotte the specific voice of a character named Bramble, who was apparently a very particular kind of frog. Ethan listened from the doorway for a while. Charlotte did the Bramble voice with complete commitment, a raspy, slightly pompous frog voice that she'd invented on the spot and that made Lily press her face into the pillow to muffle her laughing. Ethan went and did the dishes. He was standing at the sink when he heard Charlotte finish the first story and the negotiations for the second commence. He could hear Lily's voice, reasoned, organized, and Charlotte's response, which was firm but not unkind. Then a pause. Then Charlotte reading the second story, which was shorter, and which Lily fell asleep during because this had been Charlotte's strategy since Lily was 3 years old. Agree to the second story, but make it boring enough that sleep happens anyway. He'd watched her figure that out. He'd watched her figure out approximately 1,000 things about his daughter over 5 years, in real time, adjusting and adapting the way you do when you're paying actual attention rather than performing attention. Charlotte came out of Lily's room with the door left partially open and the small lamp in the corner still on, the way Lily needed it, not so bright that it kept her awake, not so dark that she'd wake up disoriented. Charlotte pulled the door to its correct position without looking, by feel, because she knew what position it needed to be in. She came into the kitchen. Ethan had finished the dishes and was making coffee, the actual kind from the French press, not the broken machine, which he'd been quietly acknowledging needed to be replaced, but hadn't yet said out loud. 2.5 stories, Charlotte said. She was asleep by page 4 of the second one. Classic. She fought it for 2 pages. The frog helped. The frog always helps. He poured water into the kettle. You invented that voice 3 years ago. It's the same voice. It's exactly the same voice. He looked at her. You remembered. Charlotte stood by the counter. She'd have noticed if I changed it. She would have, he agreed. She notices everything. The kettle started its pre-boil rumbling. Charlotte leaned against the counter with her arms loosely crossed, not defensively, just the posture of someone standing still for the first time in several hours. She looked slightly tired, which was not something he saw from her often. She was skilled at not showing tired, but it was the kind of tired that softened rather than diminished. Thank you for tonight, she said. You say that every time. I mean it every time. I know you do. He turned to face her, leaning against the counter on the other side of the kitchen. The distance between them was maybe 4 feet, which in a kitchen is not very much, and in a conversation that had been building since a street market that morning was less than that. Charlotte? Ethan. I've been thinking about something since the restaurant. She waited. You said you've been managing this for 4 years, he said. And I've been sitting with that. Because I wasn't. He stopped, reorganized. I want you to know that the fact that you carried that on your own for that long is not something I take lightly. I don't feel good about it. You didn't know, she said. I should have paid better attention. You were paying plenty of attention to other things, your daughter, your job, your life. She said it without sharpness. You're not responsible for feelings I decided to keep to myself. I know, but He pressed his lips together. I'm sorry it was lonely. She looked at him for a moment. Something shifted in her face, not breaking, not dramatic, but a small and genuine movement, like something that had been holding its position for a long time, released a little tension. Don't be sorry, she said quietly. It brought us here. A rain shower brought us here, he said. The rain shower helped. She almost smiled. Gerald helped. Gerald is going to be insufferable now, an origin story. He'll be impossible. He's a lamp. He's a lamp with weight now. That changes a lamp. She did smile then, the full one. He watched it happen and felt the particular warmth that had been there for 6 years operating under a different label. The kettle boiled. He made the coffee with the careful attention the French press required, not because coffee required ceremony, but because his hands needed something to do during conversations that mattered. He poured 2 cups and brought them to the kitchen table, which still had Lily's solar system on it. They sat across from each other, which was where they always sat. Can I tell you something? Charlotte said. Yeah. She wrapped both hands around her cup. The night the Riverside deal collapsed, the one I mentioned at lunch, when you drove over with the soup, I remember. You stayed until almost midnight. I didn't ask you to. You were there and then you stayed. She looked at the table. And at some point, I fell asleep on the couch, and when I woke up, you'd covered me with a blanket from the closet and left a note on the coffee table. He remembered. He hadn't known she'd woken up and found the note. They'd never talked about it. What did the note say? He asked, though he remembered that too. It said, it'll be a different problem tomorrow. Get some sleep. And your number, even though I already had it, and a PS that said the soup was in the fridge if I wanted it in the morning. She looked up at him. I kept the note. He stared at her. You kept it. It's in a drawer somewhere. I've moved 4 times since then, and it has moved with me. She said it the way people say things they've decided to stop being embarrassed about. I don't think I was keeping it consciously. I think I just never threw it away, and after the second move, I understood why. Charlotte? It's just a note, she said, the reflex to qualify it coming up automatically. Then she stopped herself. No, it's not just a note. I kept it because it was one of those moments where I looked at something you'd done and thought. She paused, picking the right words. I thought, this is what I want. Not the soup, not the note. The person who does that without thinking about it, who just does it because you needed it, and he was there. He was quiet. The thing in his chest was doing the unsteady thing again, the thing he'd been living with all day, except now it felt less frightening than it had that morning and more like something that had been waiting for permission. I do things without thinking about it when it's you, he said slowly. I've never thought about why. It's just, when it's you, the calculus is different. What you need registers differently than what anyone else needs. I know, she said. I've watched it happen. Is that, he paused, is that what 4 years looks like from the outside? Watching something register and not being able to say what it means? Mostly, she turned her cup, with some bouts of making myself very busy in between. The acquisitions, and the Lakeshore property, and the West Loop project, and the 18 months where I decided I was going to learn to sail. She said this last one with the particular expression of someone who has survived a decision they are not entirely proud of. You learned to sail. I learned the vocabulary of sailing. I went out twice. Once was fine. The second time I was on the water for 4 hours and spent most of it thinking about how I could have been doing literally anything else, and I decided the boats were not the solution I was looking for. I did not know about the boats. I didn't advertise the boats. She looked at him. I was trying very hard to find something that worked as well as... She stopped. As well as what? As well as you did, she said plainly. As well as a Sunday afternoon at the market or dinner in your kitchen or sitting on the floor with Lily doing a puzzle. Those things worked better than anything else in my life, and I could not make sense of that, and so I tried boats, and they were not the answer. He leaned forward with his elbows on the table. The solar system was between them, Lily's 11-planet, gold-ringed, Enceladus-inclusive solar system, drawn in the colors available rather than the colors accurate. There was something about it, sitting there between them, that seemed right. A child's version of the universe, inventive and imprecise and entirely her own. I've been trying to figure out, Ethan said, when the line moved, between, he gestured, between what I told myself it was and what it apparently actually was. What do you think? Charlotte said. He thought about it honestly. I think the line didn't move, he said. I think I drew it in the wrong place to begin with. She looked at him. I think I decided very early that you were, he chose the word deliberately, safe, as a category, safe and important, and those two things together made a kind of locked box. You're my best friend. That means I don't look at it the other way. That means I'm safe from, he exhaled, from wanting something I was terrified to want, because if I wanted it and it went wrong, I'd lose the person who matters more than anyone except Lily. So you locked it. So I locked it. And then I dated people and wondered why nothing felt real and told myself it was because of Lily, or because of my job, or because of the schedule, or because I was still managing the fallout from Rachel. He shook his head slightly. I had a very organized list of reasons that weren't the reason. You and your lists. I don't have lists. You absolutely have lists. You have a list for the grocery store, a list for the weekend tasks, a list for... Those are practical. This was also practical, she said. You needed reasons. You made reasons. That's not a flaw, Ethan. It's what you do when you're scared of the right answer. He looked at her. What did you do instead? I made money, she said dryly. Which is marginally better, at least structurally speaking. The boats didn't help, but the buildings did give other people stable leases, so... She shrugged. Net positive for the neighborhood. He laughed, genuinely, suddenly, The laugh that comes when something is funny and also true and you're not trying to manage it. She laughed too, and for a moment they were just two people at a kitchen table laughing, which is one of the most ordinary and quietly important things that happens between two people who are in the process of finally being honest. When it settled, the kitchen was quieter. Lily's small sounds from her room, she made sounds when she slept, soft and irregular, filled the background. The coffee was warm. The solar system was on the table. "Ethan," Charlotte said, and her voice had shifted. More careful, the way she sounded when she was about to say something she'd prepared. "Yeah. I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer it the same way." "Okay." "Today has been a lot." She said it evenly. "A good a lot, but a lot. And I don't want to misread where we are, so." She looked at him. "Where are we?" He held her gaze. He didn't rush to answer, which she knew was not hesitation, but the particular way he thought when he was deciding to be precise instead of fast. She waited. "We're somewhere I haven't been before," he said, "which is, I've known you for 6 years and that's not nothing, but this specific place is new, and I'm being honest when I tell you it's not frightening in the way I thought it would be." He paused. "It's frightening in a different way." "What way?" "The way where you realize you're holding something that matters and you want to be careful. Not careful in the way of avoiding it, careful in the way of not messing it up." "That's..." She stopped. "What?" "That's the most honest thing you've said all day," she said. "And you've said some pretty honest things." "I've had a full day of it," he agreed. "I'm going to need a lot of water." She looked at him, and the expression on her face was the one he didn't have cataloged. The open one, the undefended one, the one he'd caught at the vendor's table, and then again under the awning, and now here, in his kitchen, where she'd sat 50 times and never looked quite like this. "I'm scared too," she said. "I want you to know that. Not of you or of this, but of what it costs if we can't find our way back to..." She gestured at the kitchen, at everything the kitchen represented. 6 years of showing up and being known. "This, if it goes wrong..." "I know," he said. "The friendship is not a consolation prize," she said. "I don't want you to think I said everything I said today because I'm willing to burn it down. I'm not. I know that." "Then you understand why I'm careful," he finished. "Yeah, I understand exactly why you're careful." He held her eyes. "Charlotte, I'm not asking you to bet on something uncertain. I'm telling you that I've spent 6 years not letting myself understand something that was true the whole time. That's..." He shook his head. "That's not a gamble. That's paying attention to what's already there." She was quiet for a moment. "You sound very sure for someone who said he didn't have a clean answer this afternoon." "I'm more sure than I was this afternoon," he said. "The afternoon was the beginning of sure. I'm in the middle of it now." She looked at him for a long time. Outside the kitchen window, the Chicago night was doing what it did in early September. The specific dark that has warmth left in it, not the hard winter dark, just the early version, the reminder of what's coming. In Lily's room, she made a small sound in her sleep and went quiet again. "I'm going to say something," Charlotte said, "and I want you to just let me say it." "Okay." She took a breath. Not the kind that meant she was upset. The kind that meant she was about to be precise. "I have spent 4 years managing something I thought I couldn't have. And the management worked. I was functional. I was fine. I built things. And I kept showing up. And I kept the friendship intact. And I was proud of myself for it, in the way you're proud of something that cost you." She paused. "And I'm done managing it. That's what today was. Not me asking you a question. Me telling you I'm done keeping this in a box, whether or not you..." She stopped. "Whether or not anything changes. I'm done carrying it the way I've been carrying it. It was too heavy, and I should have set it down earlier, and I didn't." He was listening, really listening, the way she always said he did, with his whole attention, not waiting for the pause to speak. "What that means for us," she said carefully. "I don't know. I don't have a script for this. I'm bad at not having a script." She met his eyes. "But I needed you to know the whole thing, not just the part that came out under the awning." He reached across the table. Not dramatically, not a cinematic gesture, nothing orchestrated. He just reached across and put his hand over hers, where it rested beside her coffee cup, and held it. The way you hold something you've been holding in your head and have finally put down where you can actually feel it. She looked at his hand, then at him. "The whole thing," he said. "I've got it." "Yeah? Yeah?" His thumb moved slightly across her knuckles. "For the record, I've had some version of your whole thing for a while. I just hadn't admitted what it was." "What was it?" He thought about the note in her drawer, about driving 40 minutes with Soup because she'd had a bad day, about knowing which side of the table she sat on and why, about Lily, at 5 years old, saying Charlotte was basically already family and being right in the way that children are right, without the need to make it complicated. "It was this," he said. "It's always been this. I just didn't have the word for it." She turned her hand under his, slowly, so they were holding hands properly across the solar system. Her grip was firm and direct, the way she did everything, and he felt his chest do something that was not quite calm and not quite the opposite. Something in between, something that felt like a rival. They didn't say anything for a while. Outside, Chicago was being Chicago. Sirens somewhere distant, a car door, someone's music briefly audible and then gone. The specific city sound that was the constant background of their lives. In Lily's room, a small person slept through all of it with the magnificent indifference of someone who has made her opinions known about the solar system and Enceladus and considers her work complete. "You should probably go home," Ethan said eventually. "It's getting late." "I know," Charlotte said. She didn't move. "I'm not," he paused. "I'm not saying I want you to go." "I know," she said again. "I'm saying it because," he looked at her, "because I want to do this right. Whatever this is. I don't want to rush it into a shape before we understand what it actually is." She studied him. "You're being very measured for someone who said they've been in this for 6 years. "I've been waiting 6 years," he said. "I can wait a little longer to be sure I'm doing it properly." Something in her expression shifted. A warmth that moved through her face the way light moves through a curtain, not sudden, but completely there. "That," she said, "is the most Ethan thing you've ever said." "Is that good?" "It's very good," she said. Yeah, it's good." She took her hand back slowly and picked up her coffee cup. The warmth of the moment didn't leave with the hand. It stayed in the room, the way warmth does when it's the right kind. "Same time next Sunday?" she said. "Same time next Sunday," he confirmed. She finished her coffee. She collected her bag from by the door. She paused with her hand on the door handle, the way she didn't usually. Charlotte Sterling didn't generally do lingering exits. "Ethan," she said. "Yeah. Thank you for not making a joke." He looked at her. "When?" "This afternoon, at the market. When he said wife and you were going to joke, and then you looked at me and you didn't." He hadn't thought about it as a deliberate choice. But she was right. There had been a moment after the vendor's words landed and he'd turned to find her expression, where the joke had been right there and he hadn't taken it. He wasn't sure why. Maybe some part of him had already understood, even then, that this one needed to be handled differently. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." She nodded once. Then she opened the door and left, the way she always left, straightforwardly, without ceremony, like someone who knows where they're going. The door closed. Ethan stood in his kitchen for a long moment. He picked up the coffee cups and rinsed them. He turned off the overhead light and left the under-cabinet light on, the small, warm one. He checked on Lily. She was deeply asleep, one arm thrown over the edge of the bed, her solar system on the nightstand, Enceladus visible in the dark. He stood in the doorway of his daughter's room for a moment. Then he went to bed. He lay on his back in the dark and looked at the ceiling of the bedroom he'd lived in for 4 years and thought about a hand held across a kitchen table and a note in a drawer that had moved 4 times. He thought about Charlotte's voice doing the Bramble voice, raspy and pompous and completely committed, and the look on her face when she didn't have a joke ready. He thought about 6 years of Sundays and what they actually added up to. He was not sure when he fell asleep. He was sure, when he did, that something in the room felt different than it had that morning, like furniture rearranged in the dark, And you don't know exactly where everything is yet, but you understand it's in better positions than before. Monday arrived the way Mondays do after a Sunday that has rearranged something, with the specific indifference of a world that does not adjust its schedule to accommodate personal revelations. Ethan's alarm went off at 6:15. Lily needed breakfast and a lost hair tie located, and her backpack checked for the reading log that was due and had been sitting on the counter for 3 days. The morning was its usual organized chaos, and Ethan moved through it on the same autopilot he always used, except that somewhere underneath the autopilot, something was running differently, like a program that had updated overnight and was still calibrating. He dropped Lily at school at 7:52. He drove to the job site, a residential renovation in Lincoln Square that was in its 3rd month and had recently developed an opinion about the load-bearing implications of a wall the client had decided, mid-project, that she wanted removed. He spent the morning having a calm and thorough conversation with a structural engineer that was, at its core, about the difference between what people want and what the building would actually support. He did not text Charlotte until 11:17, which he considered a reasonable performance given that he'd been thinking about texting her since approximately 6:45. What he sent was the Enceladus thing. I looked it up. She's right. There's a subsurface ocean. We might owe her an apology. The response came 4 minutes later. I never doubted her. You were the one questioning the dwarf planet classification. Then 10 seconds after that, good morning, by the way. He looked at those 3 words for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Good morning, he wrote back. Then he put his phone in his pocket and went back to the conversation about load-bearing walls, and the calibration continued underneath everything. This was how the week moved, in the ordinary business of days that had their own requirements and demands, with Charlotte running along beneath the surface of all of it, like a current that had always been there, but that he was now aware of in a way that changed the texture of everything. He noticed when he thought of something, and his first instinct was to call her, and instead of acting on the instinct automatically, he found himself sitting with it for a moment, not suppressing it, just observing it with a new kind of attention. The instinct was always there. It had always been there. He was simply no longer pretending it was just friendship instinct. They texted throughout the week with the same frequency they always had, which was considerable. Charlotte had always been an efficient and unsentimental texter, preferring useful information over small talk, and Ethan had adapted to this years ago. She sent him a photo on Tuesday of a paint swatch taped to the wall of her new apartment with the message, "The contractor says this is warm white. It looks like the inside of an eggshell. I'm not sure how I feel about it." He looked at the photo and wrote back, "Eggshell white is a real paint category. You might be overthinking it." She replied, "I have never in my life overthought anything." He wrote back a single question mark. She sent a laughing emoji, which she used rarely and therefore meaningfully. On Wednesday, he had Lily's parent-teacher conference, the first one of the year, 15 minutes scheduled with a woman named Miss Veronica, who had the specific, exhausted competence of a first-grade teacher in October who has already seen the full range of human childhood behavior and has made her peace with it. The conference went fine. Lily was doing well. She was, Ms. Veronica noted, with the expression of someone choosing words carefully, very confident in sharing her perspective, which Ethan understood to mean that his daughter had opinions she did not keep to herself and that this was apparently a feature of her classroom presence. He told Charlotte about it that night on the phone. Very confident in sharing her perspective, Charlotte repeated with a tone that suggested she was delighted by this. That's amazing. She's 5. She's almost 6, and she's exactly right to be confident in her perspective. Her perspective is excellent. She was correct about Enceladus. She's going to be impossible when she's a teenager. She's going to be magnificent when she's a teenager. You're going to need help. He paused at that. At the casual way she said it, you're going to need help. The implicit assumption of her own continued presence woven into it without effort or decoration. The way it landed in him wasn't the old way, the way of 6 years of careful categorization. It landed like something true. Yeah, he said. I know. A beat. Are you okay? Charlotte asked. I'm fine. Why? You got quiet in a specific way. What specific way? The way where you're processing something and you don't want to say what it is because it's not fully formed yet. He considered whether to argue this and decided it was too accurate to bother. I'm fine, he said again. Different kind of fine than usual. She let it sit. That was one of the things about Charlotte. She had learned somewhere along the years when to push and when to let a thing be. Okay, she said. Different fine is acceptable. How's the apartment? Chaotic. I have a kitchen full of boxes, and Gerald is sitting in the corner of the living room wrapped in paper because I haven't decided where to put him yet. The corner is fine. The corner is provisional. There's a difference. A pause. I'm supposed to have the main rooms finished by the weekend. My contractor is optimistic in a way I don't entirely trust. Contractors are always optimistic. You're a contractor? I know. We're optimistic professionally. It's part of the pitch. She laughed. He listened to it. He'd listened to that laugh for 6 years, and tonight it was doing something different to the inside of his chest, which he supposed was going to be the new normal for a while. All the same information, arriving differently. They talked for an hour and 20 minutes, which was not unusual. When they hung up, Ethan sat on the couch for a while in the quiet apartment. Lily had been asleep since 8:30, and looked at the far wall and thought about the note Charlotte had kept in a drawer through 4 moves. He thought about the fact that she'd told him about it, that she'd made the decision to hand him that particular piece of information, which was not strategic or impressive the way her professional life was strategic and impressive. It was just private, and she'd given it to him anyway. He got up and went to the small drawer in the kitchen where he kept the things that didn't have an obvious category. Rubber bands, a spare key to a lock he no longer had, a dried-out pen that he kept meaning to throw away. He opened the drawer and looked at it for a moment. Then he closed it and went to bed, carrying something he hadn't quite identified yet, but that felt like it was getting closer to having a name. Thursday brought a problem on the Lincoln Square job that required his physical presence for most of the day, and a call from Lily's school at 2 in the afternoon informing him that Lily had a headache and could he come get her. He went and got her. She did not have a fever. She explained on the drive home with the frankness of someone who sees no reason to be strategic about this, gotten a headache because the classroom was too bright, and she hadn't wanted to go outside for recess because it was cold, and she'd put her head on the desk, and a girl named Michaela had said she looked like she was sleeping, and she'd explained she wasn't sleeping, but the whole conversation had made her head hurt more, and could they get soup? They got soup. He texted Charlotte a photo of Lily on the couch with a blanket and a bowl of soup and the solar system drawing balanced on her knees. Charlotte replied within 2 minutes. Tell her the subsurface ocean of Enceladus has been confirmed by NASA, and she was entirely correct. Lily's response, when Ethan read this to her, was to nod once with the satisfied gravity of a scientist whose findings have been peer-reviewed. I know, she said. Then, tell Charlotte I hope her apartment gets finished. He relayed this. Charlotte replied, Tell Lily the contractor is trying his best. Tell her also that Gerald is still in the corner, but I moved him 2 inches to the left and it's better. Lily considered this when he read it. What's Gerald? She asked. A lamp. Why does it have a name? Because Charlotte named it. Lily thought about this with the seriousness it apparently deserved. What color? Green. Lily said, in a way that suggested she was reserving judgment, which was fair. By Friday, the Lincoln Square job was in a better position. The structural issue had been resolved in the way structural issues on old Chicago buildings usually got resolved, which was by discovering that what appeared to be a problem was actually the building having already compensated for itself over 80 years, which was both reassuring and slightly humbling. Ethan wrote up a revised plan, confirmed the timeline with the client, and drove home in the late afternoon with the specific satisfaction of a problem that had been looked at carefully and found to be manageable. He was cooking dinner, something simple, pasta, because Friday was not a cast-iron night, when his phone rang. He expected Charlotte. The number that came up was not Charlotte's. It was Daniel. Daniel Reyes was Ethan's oldest friend, going back to the university years, a man who now lived in Denver with his wife and 2 kids, and who called with the consistent but not frequent rhythm of someone who takes friendship seriously without making it a performance. They talked maybe once a month, sometimes more. Daniel had always had a quality that Ethan both valued and found occasionally unsettling, which was that he asked questions that didn't announce themselves as important before they arrived. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hold on, I've got pasta water." He dealt with the pasta water. Daniel waited. "Okay," Ethan said. "What's up?" "Nothing specific," Daniel said. "I had a 40-minute window, and I figured I'd use it." "How's Lily?" "Headache on Thursday. Fine now. She's named the local moon of Saturn and has opinions about it." "That's my girl. How's work?" "Load-bearing wall situation that turned out to be fine. The usual." "And how's Charlotte?" Ethan was quiet for approximately 3 seconds, which was 2.5 seconds longer than his usual response time for questions about Charlotte, and which Daniel, who had known him for 15 years, would absolutely have noticed. "Good," Ethan said. "Uh-huh," Daniel said. "What?" "Nothing. How is she?" "She's moving into a new apartment. She's good." "Ethan." "What, Daniel?" "Something happened." "Why do you think something happened?" "Because you took 3 seconds to say she was good, and then you said she's moving into a new apartment, like that was a complete answer." Ethan stirred the pasta. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something starting to burn at the edge of the pan, which he attended to. "You've been married too long," he said. "You notice too many things." "I notice things because you're one of my best friends, and you have been conducting a very long and complicated internal drama about Charlotte Sterling for at least 4 of the 6 years you've known her, and I have been waiting for an actual development with the patience of a man who loves you and has his own life to deal with." Ethan put down the spoon. 4 years? At minimum, possibly 5. I only figured it out this week. I know. I've been aware for longer than you have. So has Priya, for the record. Priya knows? Ethan. Priya met Charlotte at your birthday 2 years ago and called me on the drive home and said, "He's in love with her and he doesn't know it. This is going to take a while." Direct quote. He stood in his kitchen on a Friday night while his pasta boiled and absorbed the information that his friends in Denver had understood something about his own life before he did. He was not sure whether to be embarrassed or relieved. He settled on a strange combination of both. "Something happened Sunday," he said. "Tell me." He told him. Not all of it, not the note in the drawer or the details of the kitchen table conversation, because those felt like things that belonged to the two of them. But the shape of it, the market, the rain, the vendor's comment, Charlotte's silence, the lunch, the dinner, the hand across the table. Daniel listened without interrupting, which was his best quality. When Ethan finished, there was a pause. "So you told her," Daniel said. "I told her something. I told her. I said it was always her. I said the right words, I think." "You think?" "I didn't. I was careful. I didn't want to say more than I was sure of." "Are you sure now?" Ethan looked at the pasta, which needed to come off the heat. He took it off. "Yeah," he said. "I'm sure." "Then what are you waiting for?" "I'm not waiting for anything. We said same time next Sunday. You're going to have another Sunday," Daniel said, not unkindly. "And she's going to be great, and Lily's going to be there, and it's going to be exactly what it's always been. And at the end of it, you're going to be exactly where you are right now." "That's not—" "I said we needed to be sure." "You're sure. You just told me you're sure. Sure of what I feel, not sure of how to do it. This is a 6-year friendship, Daniel. You don't just what? Tell someone you love them?" The word landed in the kitchen with more weight than Ethan had been prepared for. He'd been working around it all week, using careful constructions. Completely gone on you. It's always been this, the thing that matters. And Daniel had just put the specific word in the air, and now it was in the air. "I didn't say love," Ethan said. "No," Daniel agreed. "I did. Because from where I'm standing, which is not in your kitchen in Chicago, but has the advantage of perspective, that is what this is. And I think you know it, and I think Charlotte knows it. And I think the two of you are being very careful with it because you're both scared of getting it wrong, which is reasonable, but there is a version of careful that is just another word for not doing the thing." Ethan was quiet. "You've been not doing the thing for 6 years," Daniel said. "Priya says hi, by the way." "Tell her hi back," Ethan said automatically. "I will. Also, she says, and I'm quoting directly, if he doesn't figure this out soon, Charlotte is going to find her patience, and that's the end of it." Charlotte already said everything. Charlotte was the one who... Charlotte said her part. You said some of yours. You haven't said all of it. A pause. "I'm not telling you to rush anything. I'm telling you that you already know what you want, and there's a point where careful crosses over into something else." After they hung up, Ethan plated the pasta and called Lily for dinner, and they ate, and Lily talked about Michaela, who had apparently apologized for the sleeping comment and was now possibly a friend again. The social landscape of first grade being a dynamic and frequently renegotiated territory. He listened and asked questions and was present in the way he tried always to be present with his daughter. And underneath it, Daniel's words were running their course, moving through him the way a true thing moves when it's found its way in. There is a point where careful crosses over into something else. He knew what that something else was called. He'd been careful not to call it that, even in his own head, because calling it that meant he had to do something with it. He put Lily to bed at 8:30. He washed the dishes. He stood in his kitchen in the particular quiet of a Friday night with a sleeping child in the next room and the week settling around him, and he thought about a woman who kept a note through 4 apartments and named a lamp and did a frog voice with complete commitment and had told him, with the direct courage that was the most essentially Charlotte thing about her, that she was done carrying something alone. He took his phone off the counter. He thought about calling. He picked up the phone and looked at her name and then set it back down, because calling her on a Friday night to say, what exactly? He didn't have the words organized yet. He had the certainty and not yet the shape of it, and Charlotte deserved the shape, not just the certainty delivered in a rush on a Friday phone call. Sunday, he thought. One more Sunday. He would do it right. Saturday was Lily's soccer, the modified, barely structured version that 6-year-olds play, where the coaching primarily involves redirecting children toward the correct goal and celebrating the relative frequency of actual foot-to-ball contact. Ethan stood on the sideline with the other parents in the specific solidarity of people united by temperature and coffee and the shared understanding that the score does not matter, but everyone is maintaining the fiction that it does. Lily played with the full-body commitment she brought to everything she decided was worth her time. She did not score, but she had a very determined run down the left side of the field that ended in a collision with a teammate, both of whom bounced off each other and immediately resumed, which seemed like a reasonable metaphor for something Ethan couldn't quite identify. He took her to the bookstore after. This was the Saturday ritual when there was no specific obligation. Soccer, then the bookstore 2 blocks from the field, where Lily was permitted to choose one book with no commentary from him on the choice. Today she selected a book about deep-sea creatures that was clearly above her current reading level, which she acknowledged by saying, "You can read it to me, but I want to look at the pictures myself." He bought it. He also bought a coffee from the small counter at the back of the bookstore and stood drinking it while Lily sat on the floor in the children's section and turned pages with great seriousness. He was looking at a display of new fiction without really seeing it when his phone buzzed. "Charlotte. Contractor finished the main rooms. Gerald is in his permanent location. Come see?" He looked at the message. Then, before he'd consciously decided, "Today? If you're free. No pressure. I want someone to see it before I start second-guessing everything." He looked across the bookstore at Lily, who was now lying on her stomach with the deep sea book open in front of her and her chin in her hands. The bookstore had that particular Saturday warmth of a place where people come to be around books and other people who like books without any particular pressure to do anything about it. "We're at the bookstore," he wrote. "We can come by after." "Hour? Perfect. I'll order pizza. Lily's pick. She'll want the one with the pepperoni and extra cheese on half." "I know." He put his phone in his pocket. "Lily," he said. She looked up from the deep-sea creatures. "Charlotte's new apartment is done. She wants us to come see it." Lily sat up, the full-body alertness of a child who has received information that registers as good arrived instantly. "Is Gerald there?" "Gerald is in his permanent location, apparently." Lily stood up, holding the deep-sea book. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." Charlotte's new apartment was in the West Loop, a building that had been a warehouse 20 years ago and still carried the bones of that in its exposed brick and high ceilings and windows that ran from near the floor to nearly the top of the 12-foot walls. She'd bought it 8 months ago and had been renovating it in stages while living in a rental, and Ethan had seen the floor plans and heard the updates, and seen approximately 40 paint swatches over the course of the project, but he hadn't been inside since the renovation began. She met them at the door. She was wearing paint-stained jeans and a flannel she'd clearly grabbed without thinking about it, her hair pulled back in the quick way that always looked precisely right, and she had the specific energy of someone who has been moving furniture around all day and has opinions about where things ended up. "Okay," she said before they were fully through the door. "The living room is mostly done. The kitchen is functional, but the cabinet handles haven't arrived yet, so there are just holes where the handles should be. Ignore the holes." "Charlotte," Ethan said. "What?" "Hi?" She stopped, looked at him, then she exhaled. "Hi," she said. "Sorry, I've been in project mode all day." "I can tell. Is it bad?" "It's very you." She looked like she wasn't sure whether that was a compliment. He let her sit with that for a second, because it was a compliment, and she would know that if she thought about it. Lily had already moved past them into the living room, which was what Lily did in spaces. She mapped them immediately, walking the perimeter with the systematic attention of an explorer establishing territory. "Oh," she said from the living room. "Oh, I see him." Charlotte and Ethan followed her in. Gerald was in the corner by the tall windows, the ones that caught the late afternoon light and turned it into something amber and generous. Someone had put a small side table under him, dark wood, and his green ceramic base sat on it, and his green shade caught the light, and the whole thing glowed the way ugly. Beautiful things glow when you put them in the right place. He was wrong for the room in every technical sense, and he was completely right in the only sense that mattered. "He's great," Lily said. "He's Gerald," Charlotte said. "I know. Dad told me." Lily walked closer and looked at him the way she looked at tortellini, with the reverence reserved for things that are alive in their own particular way. "He's really green." "Extremely," Charlotte agreed. "I like it." Lily touched the base gently with one finger. "He has a good face." "He doesn't have a face," Ethan said. "Everything has a face," Lily said, with the certainty of someone for whom this is not a philosophical position but a simple observation, and moved on to inspect the rest of the room. The apartment was good. Ethan could see as he walked through it the decisions Charlotte had made and why she'd made them, the restraint of it, the absence of anything decorative that didn't have a reason. She'd left a lot of wall space. The furniture was sparse and good quality and arranged for actual use rather than the appearance of use. The kitchen was the warmest room, even with the handle holes, because she'd chosen a backsplash tile that was the amber yellow of old honey, and it caught the afternoon light the same way Gerald did. The bathroom he didn't see because that was still apparently in negotiation. "The floors," he said in the hallway. "Original," she said. "I had them refinished, but I kept the imperfections. The contractor wanted to fill them, but—" She shrugged. "They're part of it." He looked at the floors. Wide plank wood, old, with the particular patina of something that had been walked on for decades by people who didn't know they were preserving anything. "Good call," he said. She glanced at him sideways. "Don't tell me I was right. You were right." "I know. I just don't like it confirmed too quickly. It makes me suspicious." From the living room, Lily was narrating something to herself. The ongoing internal monologue that she maintained when she was exploring a new space, a quiet stream of observations not directed at anyone in particular. Charlotte listened to it with the small smile she had specifically for Lily, which was different from her other smiles in a way Ethan had noticed years ago without examining it. "I love this place," Charlotte said quietly. Not performing it, just saying it. "I can tell," he said. "It took too long to get here. I kept changing my mind about things and then unchanging it and then, you know how I am." "I know how you are." "The eggshell white is actually fine." "I know." "The contractor was right about the eggshell white, and I'm choosing not to fully acknowledge that." "That seems fair." She looked at him. They were standing in the hallway of her new apartment in the late afternoon on a Saturday, and it was the most normal situation in the world, and also, he understood now with a clarity that had been building all week, not that at all. "You went quiet again," she said. "I was thinking." "About?" He looked at her. "About the fact that I talked to Daniel yesterday." Something shifted in her face, careful attention. "How is Daniel?" "Good. Ethan paused. He pointed out that I've been careful all week in a way that might be tipping into something else. Charlotte was very still. "What's something else?" "Into avoiding the thing I've already decided." She held his gaze for a moment. In the living room, Lily had gone quiet. Not the worrying kind of quiet, the kind where she'd found something absorbing and was engaged with it independently. The apartment was holding the late afternoon around them, the amber light and the old floors and Gerald glowing in his corner. "What have you decided?" Charlotte asked. He looked at her. He thought about the note she'd kept through 4 moves. He thought about the 40-minute drive with Soup and the Bramble voice and 6 years of Sundays, and his daughter saying she's basically already family and meaning it in the simple, empirical way of someone who is just describing what she sees. He thought about Daniel saying the word that he'd been working around all week. "I love you," he said. He said it plainly, without building up to it, without hedging, without the careful constructions he'd been using to avoid the specific weight of those 3 words. He just said it, in a hallway in her new apartment, on a Saturday afternoon because he was done being careful about it. Charlotte looked at him. She didn't move. Something was happening in her face that he was watching happen in real time. Not surprise because he didn't think it was surprise exactly, but something deeper than surprise. Something that had been waiting under a long tension and had just felt that tension release. "You can't just," she started. Stopped. "I can," he said. "I should have said it earlier. I've been organizing my way around saying it all week, and I'm done with that." "Ethan, I know the timing. I know we're in a hallway, and Lily's in the next room, and you have pizza coming. I know this isn't It's not arranged the way you'd arrange it, but I've been running from the right word for 6 years, and I've run out of reasons to keep doing that." She put her hand on the wall beside her, a small steadying motion. She was looking at him with that open, undefended expression, the one he'd been cataloging since Sunday, the one that was not in his original 17. "Say it again," she said. Quietly. "I love you," he said. "The whole version. Not the careful edited version I've been handing out. The actual one." She closed her eyes. Not in distress, in something else, the way you close your eyes when something has arrived that you've been waiting for long enough that the arrival itself needs a moment. He watched her. He was not nervous. He was the most certain he'd been of anything in recent memory. Standing in this hallway with the old floors and the afternoon light, and whatever she said next he was going to be okay with because he had said the true thing, and the true thing had been said. She opened her eyes. "I've been in love with you for 4 years," she said, "and I have been extremely inconvenienced by it." He almost laughed. "Almost." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry about that." "You should be. I learned to sail. The boats were terrible." "I know. I'm sorry about the boats." She looked at him with the eyes that shifted between coffee dark and amber, and were currently doing something he didn't have an existing category for. "If you'd figured this out 4 years ago," she said, "I would have saved a considerable amount of money on boat rental." 4 years ago I wasn't ready," he said. "I think I needed all of it. The time and the wrong answers and Rachel and Sarah and the part where I watched you build 3 businesses in 4 years because you were trying to outrun something. And I didn't understand what, and now I do." He held her gaze. "I needed to get here the way I got here. On a Sunday at a street market," she said, "in the rain. Because an old man said 1 word. And you didn't make a joke." "And I didn't make a joke," he agreed. She reached out. Her hand found his arm first, then his shoulder, the way you reach for someone when the distance has been long and you're not quite sure where to put your hands. He closed the remaining space between them. Not dramatic, not sudden, just the 3 steps it took to stand in front of her properly, and put his hand against her face the way he'd thought about it once or twice, and then firmly not thought about it. She leaned into his hand slightly, like a small concession after a long argument. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. From the living room, Lily's voice. "The pizza's here! I can hear the buzzer!" Neither of them moved for exactly one more second. Then Charlotte smiled, the full one, the real one, the one that used her whole face, and took a breath that was slightly unsteady in the best way and said, "We should get the door." "We should get the door," he agreed. She turned. He followed her down the hallway toward the living room where his daughter was already at the intercom with the focused energy of someone who has been waiting for pizza and considers this a logistical matter of some importance. And Gerald glowed in his corner by the tall windows, green and warm and entirely at home. They hadn't kissed yet. That was still ahead of them, in whatever moment arranged itself next. Not tonight, maybe, with Lily there and the pizza and the ordinary business of the evening settling around them. There was time. There was, for the first time in 6 years, nothing hiding and nothing locked, and nothing that needed to be managed through a strategic acquisition or a boat. Just the apartment and the light and his daughter and Charlotte's hand brushing his arm as they came through the doorway into the living room, unremarkable and entirely deliberate. He thought about the furniture rearranged in the dark. Here, in the late afternoon light, he could see exactly where everything was. It was better than he'd imagined. The pizza was pepperoni on one half, plain cheese on the other, because Charlotte had ordered it exactly right without asking, which was the kind of thing that stopped registering as remarkable when you'd known someone long enough and started registering again, in a different way, when the terms of what you knew had changed. They ate on the floor of the living room because the dining table Charlotte had ordered hadn't arrived yet, and the three of them had collectively decided that sitting on the floor was not a problem, but rather a feature of a Saturday evening in a new apartment. Lily had no objections to this. Lily, in fact, treated the floor eating as a specific upgrade from the usual arrangement, spreading herself out with her pizza and her deep-sea creature book in a way that suggested she considered this the correct way to have dinner and had been waiting for adults to catch up to this conclusion. Gerald glowed in his corner. Ethan sat with his back against the couch that Charlotte had pushed against the wall while she waited for the rug to arrive, and Charlotte sat beside him, not at the careful distance of two people who have just said important things and aren't sure what to do with their bodies afterward, but close, their shoulders occasionally touching in the easy way of people who have been in the same physical space enough that proximity is unremarkable, except that it was remarkable now, in the specific way that things become remarkable when you stop pretending they're ordinary. She handed him a piece of pizza without looking at him. He took it. Their fingers touched, and neither of them made anything of it, which was itself a kind of making something of it. "Deep-sea creatures," Lily announced, from her position on the floor, "have their own light. Bioluminescence," Charlotte said. "That's the word." Lily pointed at a page. "This one makes a light to catch things. It makes the light look like food, and then when something comes to eat it," she made a closing snap gesture with her hand, "gone." "Nature is not subtle," Charlotte said. "No," Lily agreed with approval. Ethan looked at the two of them, his daughter, flat on her stomach with a book about the deep ocean, narrating its contents to a woman who listened with the full attention she brought to everything she decided was worth her time. Something moved through him that was too large and too specific to be called one thing. It had gratitude in it. It had something like grief for the years of unnecessary distance. Mostly it had the particular quality of a person who has been standing outside a warm room for a long time and has finally, actually, gone in. He didn't say any of this. He ate his pizza and listened to Lily explain the anglerfish and let the evening be what it was. At 8 o'clock, Lily fell asleep. This was not planned. It happened the way it always happened with her, which was suddenly and completely, the way children's bodies override their minds when the accumulated weight of a day exceeds the available energy. 1 minute she was turning pages, the next her head was down on her arm, and her breathing had changed, and she was deeply, thoroughly gone. The deep-sea book was still open to the anglerfish. Charlotte and Ethan looked at each other over Lily's sleeping form. "She's out," Ethan said. "She's completely out," Charlotte confirmed. "I should move her." "She's fine for a few minutes." He leaned his head back against the couch. The apartment was quiet in the way that good spaces are quiet. Not empty, just settled. The city was outside doing what cities do, but the windows were good and the walls were solid, and in here the sound was down to the ambient level of a place that is itself. Gerald's light was the warmest light in the room. The overhead was off. Charlotte had lit 2 candles on the windowsill earlier without ceremony, the way you light candles in a new space to make it feel like yours. "I've been thinking about something," Charlotte said. Her voice was low, adjusted for the sleeping child 3 feet away. "What?" "Everything you said. In the hallway." He looked at her. "Okay. I've been thinking about whether I believe it." He was quiet for a moment, making sure he understood what she was asking. "Do you?" She turned to look at him, which brought her face close in the low candlelight, and he could see the careful honesty in her expression. The same directness she'd had at the restaurant, at the kitchen table, every time she'd chosen to say the real thing rather than the easier one. "I believe you mean it," she said. "Right now, in this moment, I believe it completely. But I've spent 4 years being very good at managing my own expectations," she said. "And I know the thing I'm supposed to say is that I trust it, and I'm in, and I'm not scared, but that would be a lie, and She looked at the candles. "I'm trying to stop lying about things." "What are you scared of?" She was quiet for long enough that it wasn't a pause but an actual consideration. "That this is the thing that finally breaks what we have," she said. "That we try, and it turns out the friendship was the right container for this, and the other thing doesn't work, and we can't find our way back." She looked at him. "That Lily loses something." He let that sit. He didn't rush to disagree with it, because the fear was real and deserved to be treated as real, rather than immediately argued away. "That's a legitimate thing to be scared of," he said. "I know it is. And I can't promise you it's impossible." She held his gaze. "I know that too. What I can tell you," he said carefully, "is that the friendship is not separate from this. It's the thing this is built on. It's not at risk from this. It's the reason this exists." He paused. "And Lily," he looked at his daughter, sleeping with one hand curled under her cheek, the deep sea book still open. "Lily already has you. That's not contingent on anything between us. Whatever happens, that doesn't change." Charlotte looked at Lily for a moment. The expression on her face was the one she had specifically for Ethan's daughter, the particular warmth of it, and Ethan watched her wear it and understood something he hadn't quite put into words before, that Charlotte loved Lily. Not as a category of being good about the kid situation. Actually loved her, in the specific way of someone who has shown up consistently enough that the love accumulated without anyone tracking it. "She asked me once," Charlotte said quietly, "whether I was going to get married." Ethan looked at her. "When?" "Last spring. You were in the other room. We were doing that puzzle, the one with the maps of the world. She asked me if I wanted to get married someday, and I said I didn't know, and she said..." A small pause. "She said, 'I think you should marry someone nice. Someone like my dad.'" The apartment was very quiet. "She's 5, Ethan said. "Almost 6, Charlotte said, and she was very serious about it." "What did you say?" "I said I'd think about it." She looked at him. "And then I went into the kitchen to get more juice, and I stood at the counter for about 3 minutes trying to locate my composure." He looked at her for a long time. "Charlotte, I know. She's been ahead of us the whole time." "Children usually are," Charlotte said. "They don't have the same investment in keeping things manageable." He reached out and took her hand. Not across the table this time, just directly, sitting beside her on the floor of her new apartment while his daughter slept and the candles burned and Gerald held his corner. Her hand was the same as it had been at the kitchen table, grip firm and direct, no performance in it. But something was different now. Some quality of the held thing that was less tentative and more decided. She looked at their hands, then at him. "I'm going to need you to be patient with me," she said. I don't do this the way most people do. I'm not good at uncertainty. I manage things. I optimize things. This is not optimizable, and that makes me..." She exhaled. "I'm going to be difficult sometimes." "You're always difficult. More difficult than usual." "I've been managing your version of difficult for 6 years," he said. "I have a system." "What system?" "I give you a problem to solve. You solve it. The difficult becomes productive. She looked at him with the expression that was trying not to find him funny. That's not a system. That's manipulation. It works every time. It absolutely does, she admitted. That's the annoying part. He smiled. She watched him smile, and the guarded thing in her face moved again, not disappearing because Charlotte's guard was structural. It had been built over years of being underestimated and overexposed and learning to control what was visible, but softening in a way that felt like something chosen rather than surrendered. I love you, he said again. He'd said it once in the hallway, and she'd asked him to repeat it, and he understood now that she was going to need to hear it more than once before it started to feel safe, because 4 years of managing something alone leaves a residue that doesn't clear in an afternoon. So he said it again without setup, just because it was true, and because she needed the repetition. I'm not saying it to move things along or to close some deal. I'm saying it because it's what's true, and I spent too long not saying it, and I don't want to do that anymore. Her jaw was slightly set. The particular tension of someone trying to stay composed about something they've wanted to hear for a long time and now have to figure out what to do with. You're making it very hard to be sensible, she said. I know. I have a plan for this. I had a plan for this. The plan involved being measured and taking things slowly, and not, Charlotte. What? I love you. That's all. You don't have to have a plan. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at him with the open expression, the undefended one. And this time, she didn't arrange it away. She let him see it. I love you too, she said. I've loved you for 4 years, and it was terrible, and I'm very glad to be done with the terrible part. The boats, he said. The boats, she confirmed. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was not the kind of kiss that resolves everything cleanly. It was the kind that happens when two people have been carrying something a long time and have finally set it down, a little clumsy at the edges, slightly too careful in the middle, real in the way that things are real when they haven't been rehearsed. Her hand tightened on his briefly. His hand went to the side of her face, which was what he'd wanted to do in the hallway and hadn't, and he could feel her exhale against him, one long breath of something released. Lily slept through it. When they separated, Charlotte's expression was the one he didn't have a category for, and he accepted that he might not ever have a clean category for it. It was too specific to her, too much of what she kept for the moments she forgot to protect herself. That took too long, she said. 6 years, he agreed. I want the record to show that I'm not. She stopped. What? I'm not going to pretend that was perfect, she said, with the directness that was the most Charlotte thing about her. Because it was a little awkward, and Lily is 3 feet away, and I've wanted to do that for 4 years, and the reality is always slightly different from the idea, he said. Different from the idea, she confirmed. Good different or bad different? She looked at him. Good different, she said. Significantly good different. A pause. Don't look smug about it. I'm not looking smug. You're about to. He wasn't actually. He was feeling something that didn't have a smug component, something quieter and more substantial, the feeling of a thing that has found its right place after a long time in the wrong position. He looked at Lily, still sleeping, one sneaker half off her foot. He looked at Gerald. He looked at Charlotte beside him in the candlelight of a room that was becoming a home. We should put her to bed, he said. She can sleep on the couch, Charlotte said. I have blankets. You have boxes of blankets. Several of them are unpacked. She stood, went to one of the boxes along the wall, and produced a blanket with the efficiency of someone who knows exactly which box she put things in, which she did, because Charlotte's chaos was always organized chaos underneath. She brought it back and they laid it over Lily together, the coordinated small movement of two people who have done this enough times that they don't need to negotiate it. Lily turned her head slightly in her sleep and then was still. They went to the kitchen because that's where people go. Charlotte made tea. Not coffee, because it was past 9, and she claimed caffeine after 8 was a decision she'd made and unmade 100 times, and currently was in an unmade phase. Ethan sat on the counter while she moved around the kitchen in the unself-conscious way of someone in their own space, reaching around the cabinet handle holes without looking at them, knowing already where she'd put things, even in a kitchen she'd only had for a day. Can I ask you something? he said. You can ask me anything. We've established this. What do you actually want this to look like? She turned with 2 mugs in her hands and looked at him. This as in us, he said. Going forward. What do you want? She set the mugs down on the counter beside him. She leaned against the opposite counter the way she had in his kitchen, arms loosely crossed, thinking about the question with the genuine consideration it deserved, rather than the first answer that came up. I want Sundays, she said. I want to keep Sundays. I want the market and the terrible coffee from your broken machine and the dinners and all of it. I don't want to change the shape of what we already have. Okay, he said. I want to add things to it, she said carefully. Not replace things. Add. She looked at him. I want to be able to say what I mean without running the calculation every time. I want to call you when something goes wrong without having a reason. She paused. I want to stop performing the friendship while feeling something else. Done, he said. It's not done just because you say done. It's a starting point, he said. We figure out the rest. She picked up her tea. I also want you to finally replace the coffee machine. The coffee machine is non-negotiable, she said. That machine is a cry for help, and I've been watching you ignore it for 8 months. It makes coffee. It makes regret in liquid form. I'm buying you a new one. Charlotte, I have already looked at options, she said, without a trace of apology. There's one that does exactly what you need, and it's not even expensive, which means there's no argument available to you. So? He looked at her. You looked at coffee machines. Last week. She said it matter-of-factly. You mentioned it was broken again on Tuesday, and I looked it up that night. You looked up coffee machines for me. I look things up when they're fixable, she said. It's a habit. Then something shifted in her face, a small recognition of what she'd just revealed. I've been doing that for years, looking things up, finding solutions to problems in your life. She looked at her tea. I told myself it was just being a good friend. It was, he said. And it was also something else. And also something else, she agreed quietly. They stood in her kitchen with the handle holes and the amber tile and the tea, and the night was doing what nights do in September in Chicago, going genuinely cold now, the window above the sink showing a sky that had gone from purple to deep black, the city lights doing their version of stars below the actual ones. I have something to tell you, Ethan said. She looked at him, careful attention. The drawer in my kitchen, he said, the one with the rubber bands and the old key. Your junk drawer. My junk drawer, yes. I went and looked at it Thursday night. Why? He held her gaze. Because you told me you kept the note, and I started thinking about what I'd kept, what I'd been holding on to without examining why. He paused. I didn't find anything in the drawer. Okay. Because the things I kept aren't in a drawer, he said. They're the way I drive this particular route to the market, because you said once the other way has a light that takes forever. And the fact that I always have tea in the apartment even though I drink coffee because you prefer it. And the books on the second shelf, he stopped. There are 3 books on my second shelf that you recommended and I haven't read, but I haven't moved them because they're yours in some sense. Because you told me they were worth reading and I believed you even though I haven't gotten there yet. Charlotte was looking at him with an expression he had no category for and was not going to try to name. I've been keeping things, he said, just not in a drawer. She set her tea down on the counter. She crossed the kitchen, 4 steps, not many, and stood in front of him where he sat on the counter and put her hands on either side of him and looked at him directly at eye level. You've always been a nightmare, she said. I know. In the specific way of being so, she searched. So fundamentally decent that it makes it impossible to be reasonably mad at you for taking 6 years to figure this out. I'll work on being less decent. Don't you dare! She looked at him a moment longer. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his, which was not a kiss but was something that required the same trust as one. The particular vulnerability of that much closeness, that much stillness, choosing not to hold distance. He put his hands on her arms. They stayed like that for a moment, not saying anything, because some things don't need words added to them. Then, from the living room, Lily's sleepy voice. I'm cold. They separated. Charlotte went to find another blanket. Ethan went to the living room and found his daughter sitting up on the couch with her hair sideways and her expression deeply confused in the way of someone who has woken up in an unfamiliar place and is running the information. "Hey," Ethan said. "You fell asleep." "I know," Lily said. "Where's Charlotte?" "Getting you a blanket." Lily looked around the room. Her eyes found Gerald in the corner, still glowing, and she looked at him for a moment with the sleep-soft focus of a child whose defenses are down and who is therefore seeing things without the usual overlay of language and categorization. "He's good," she said. "He is," Ethan agreed. Charlotte came back with a blanket, and they got Lily settled again. She was mostly asleep before they finished tucking the blanket, and they stood back and looked at her for a moment. Lily on Charlotte's couch, in Charlotte's new apartment, with Charlotte's lamp in the corner and Charlotte's kitchen 10 feet away where the tea was still warm and the handles hadn't arrived yet. Charlotte's shoulder was against Ethan's arm. He thought about something Daniel had said before the conversation about doing the thing. Earlier in the call, in the casual part, Daniel had said, "You know what Priya always says about you and Charlotte? She says it looks like a family that just hasn't figured out the paperwork yet." He'd let it pass at the time, filed under the affectionate overstatements of friends who want good things for you. Standing here now, he understood it was not an overstatement. It was just an observation about something that had already happened, that had been happening for years, that had been visible to everyone who looked except the two people most responsible for it. They had built something. Not in the last week, not since a Sunday in September at a street market in the rain. Over 6 years, Sunday by Sunday, dinner by dinner, crisis by crisis, Tuesday phone call by Tuesday phone call. They had been building it the whole time without calling it what it was, and what it was a family. Imprecise and non-traditional and assembled without a blueprint, the way the real ones usually are. "Hey," Ethan said. Charlotte looked up at him. "You were right about Gerald." She looked at the lamp, the corner by the tall windows, the amber glow of him, the way he was exactly wrong for the room, and completely right in it. "I know," she said. "I should have said so earlier." "In the market?" "In the market," he confirmed. "I should have just said he was right and not argued about it." She tilted her head slightly. "But then we'd have had nothing to argue about. We would have found something else." "We always do," she agreed. She said it simply, without performance, and the simplicity of it was the thing, because it was true. They always found something to argue about, and they always found their way through it, and they always ended up somewhere like here, standing together in the low light, with something warm between them that had never had anything to do with whether they agreed about lamps. Ethan thought about the morning it all started, how ordinary it had been, the market and the vintage stalls, and the debate over a lamp that was not really about the lamp, and how the oldest vendor had said one word with the warmth of someone who saw a simple thing and named it, and how that one word had undone 6 years of careful management in the space of a single afternoon. "Wife," the man had said. And Charlotte had gone silent, and Ethan had looked at her face and seen something he hadn't been allowing himself to see. And the thing he hadn't been seeing had been there the whole time, solid and patient and entirely real, waiting for him to stop looking away. There's a particular kind of blindness that isn't stupidity. It's the blindness of someone who is protecting something so carefully that they can't see it clearly anymore. Who has built such a thorough system of management around the most important thing in their life that the system has become all they can see? Ethan had done this. Charlotte had done her own version of it. And they had both paid for it, in their separate ways, in relationships that couldn't work, in boats that weren't the answer, in 4 years of loneliness that didn't have to be lonely. The cost of being careful, when careful tips into avoidance, is time. It is always time. And time is the one thing that cannot be replaced, cannot be optimized, cannot be acquired, no matter how many successful buildings you own or how many Sunday mornings you show up for someone else's life. You get the time you use. The rest is just years passing. He wasn't interested in any more passing. Later, after they'd moved Lily to the actual couch cushions properly, after the tea had been finished and the candles had been blown out and the apartment had settled into its nighttime version, Charlotte walked Ethan and a deeply groggy Lily to the door. Lily accepted being carried to the car with the gracious resignation of someone who knows it's necessary and has decided not to argue about it tonight. She looped her arms around Ethan's neck and her head went to his shoulder and she said, without opening her eyes, "Bye, Charlotte." "Bye, Bug," Charlotte said. "Gerald looks good," Lily said. "I'll tell him you said so." Lily was asleep again before they reached the elevator. Charlotte stood in her doorway. She was holding the door open with one hand and looking at them. Ethan with Lily against his shoulder, Lily's sneaker still half off, the deep sea book that Charlotte had tucked under Ethan's arm as an afterthought. She was not trying to look like anything in particular. She was just watching them with the expression she'd stopped trying to manage. "Sunday?" Ethan said. "Sunday," she said. "Market first?" "Market first." A pause. "Gerald needs a side table lamp. A companion. Something that makes no sense with anything. That's going to be a problem." "It's going to be a project," she corrected. "There's a difference." He looked at her in the doorway of her new apartment with the old floors and the amber kitchen and Gerald in his corner. He thought about the next Sunday and the one after that. He thought about Lily's birthday in 7 weeks and the solar system drawing on her nightstand and the fact that Charlotte would be there, as she always was, except that now the way she'd be there would be the right way, the honest way, the one that didn't require either of them to file anything under a category that didn't fit. "I love you," he said, because he was going to keep saying it until it stopped being something she needed to hear and became something she just knew the way she knew her own address. "Get some sleep." "I love you," she said back. No pause, no build, just directly. And he could see that saying it without the 4-year caveat of keeping it to herself was something she was still getting used to, that it still landed on her face when it came out of her mouth, that the freedom of it wasn't yet entirely familiar. It would get familiar. "Drive safe." He went. She watched from the doorway until the elevator came. He knew this because when the elevator opened, he looked back and she was still there, one hand on the doorframe, her flannel and her paint-stained jeans, and the warm light of the apartment behind her. He raised a hand. She raised hers. The elevator closed. He stood in it with his sleeping daughter on his shoulder and his hand still slightly raised and nowhere to be except going home. He thought about something Charlotte had said at the restaurant, a week that felt like a different season ago. "I don't need certainty. I need honesty." He had given her that finally. She had given him that for years, in all the ways people give honesty before they have the language for it, by showing up, by staying, by keeping a note through 4 apartments, by learning a frog voice and holding it consistent because a 5-year-old needed it to be the same. Honesty, he was learning, is not always a declaration. Most of it is the accumulation of small, consistent choices, the choice to be there, to show up, to remember the small things, to drive 40 minutes with soup, to not leave the note somewhere and walk away, but to write it because you meant it and leave it where it can be found. He had left notes for 6 years. He just hadn't known that's what he was doing. In the apartment building lobby, the night doorman nodded at him with the particular courtesy reserved for people carrying sleeping children, and Ethan nodded back, and he carried Lily out into the September night where the air was cold and clean and smelled like a city getting ready for winter. He settled her in the back seat. She didn't wake up. He buckled her in and looked at her face in the streetlight, her face that was hers entirely, her own complete and specific person, already 9/10 of the way to whoever she was going to be. She told Charlotte to marry someone nice, someone like her dad. He hoped she'd like what the next Sunday looked like. He expected she would. She had, after all, already understood what was happening before either of them did, with the clear-eyed empiricism of someone who just looked at what was in front of her and called it by its name. He drove home through the city that was doing what cities do at 10 o'clock on a Saturday, living its various lives in lit windows and late restaurants, and the particular traffic of people still out because they aren't ready for the night to be over. He drove the route that took him past the street where the market ran on Sundays, which was quiet now, the vendor stalls long packed up, the cobblestones still faintly damp from last week's rain. He drove past the bakery with the green and white awning and the corner where they'd stood and Charlotte had said it was too close and everything had stopped being manageable. He did not stop. He just drove through it, and it was ordinary street in an ordinary city, and it was also the place where something ended and something else began, which is the way those places are. They don't announce themselves until later, and by then they're just part of the route you take. He got home. He put Lily in bed without waking her, taking the sneaker the rest of the way off, pulling the blanket up. He stood in her doorway for a moment, the way he always did. She slept with the complete confidence of someone who has never had reason to wonder if the world will hold still for her, which was one of the things he most wanted to preserve. He went to bed. He looked at the ceiling for a while. He thought about Gerald glowing in his corner. He thought about Charlotte's forehead against his. He thought about the word that the vendor had said, wife, and how it had felt wrong when he replayed it, not because it was inaccurate, but because it was insufficient, because wife was just a word, and what Charlotte was to him had never fit entirely into any word he had available. He thought about building things. He'd spent his professional life understanding how structures work, how things that last are made not of any single component, but of the relationship between components. How what matters is not any individual element, but whether they hold together under weight, whether they flex without breaking, whether the foundation was laid with attention to what would eventually be asked of it. They had laid something, Charlotte and him. Without blueprints, without intention, just by showing up Sunday after Sunday and doing the small right things and being honest in the ways they could manage at the time, and finally, honest in the ways they couldn't. It would not be perfect. That was important to understand. Charlotte would optimize things that didn't need optimizing, and he would be non-confrontational about practical problems for too long, and Lily would have opinions about all of it, and some Sundays would be ordinary in the difficult way, and some would be ordinary in the good way, and both kinds would be the same Sunday, the same market, the same people. That was the thing nobody tells you about the version of love that grows from friendship. It does not transform everything. The person you loved as a friend is still that person. The relationship does not become a movie. It becomes a Tuesday and a Sunday and a year and another year, and all the ordinary compound interest of two people who chose each other and keep choosing, which is not dramatic but is the only kind that holds. He was good with that. He closed his eyes. Somewhere across the city, in an apartment with old floors and an amber kitchen and one lamp that had no business being as right as it was, Charlotte Sterling was getting used to the feeling of having said the true thing out loud and not being destroyed by it. She was probably looking at paint samples, or organizing the boxes that hadn't been touched yet, or standing at the tall window looking at the city with the expression she had when she was thinking about something she didn't intend to manage away. She might, possibly, be looking at Gerald. He hoped she was. He fell asleep. The week turned. September moved toward October with the usual Chicago indifference to sentiment. The mornings got sharp, the trees made their decisions about color, the lake went gray in the way that meant business. Lily's birthday arrived in the first week of October and was celebrated with the required elements. A cake that was technically about the solar system but was primarily an excuse to put gold frosting on everything, a gathering of 7 6-year-olds who had collective opinions about the correct order of cake and presents, and Charlotte, who arrived with a wrapped gift and a card, and took the Bramble voice out for one of its infrequent appearances when story time became necessary to bring the energy level down from its post-cake altitude. The gift was a telescope, a real one, not a toy, child-appropriate but actual, the kind that could find actual things in an actual sky. Lily opened it and looked at it, and then at Charlotte, with the particular expression she reserved for gifts that correctly identified who she was. "For Enceladus," Charlotte said. "For Enceladus," Lily agreed with great seriousness, and hugged her with the full-body commitment she brought to everything she decided was worth her time. Ethan watched this from across the room. He was holding a juice box and not quite managing to look like someone who was simply watching a birthday party. Daniel would have had something to say about his face. He was glad Daniel was in Denver. Later, after the kids had been collected by their parents and Lily was in bed with the telescope on her nightstand next to the solar system drawing, Enceladus visible in the dark, Ethan and Charlotte sat on his kitchen floor and ate leftover cake from the pan because there was no particular reason to be formal about it. Charlotte had frosting on her thumb. She had not noticed. "She's going to want to use it tonight," Ethan said. "It's overcast." "She doesn't know that." "She will when she tries." Charlotte looked at the cake. "We should get her a star chart." Something she can actually use to find things. "I'll get one," he said. "I already ordered one," she said. "It'll arrive Thursday." He looked at her. She looked at him. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "You're just—" He stopped. "I'm just what?" "You're already 3 steps ahead of the problem," he said. As usual. She considered whether to be defensive about this, decided not to. "Someone has to be," she said. "Yeah," he said. "I know." She looked at him for a moment, then she leaned slightly, her shoulder finding his the way it did now, the way it had always done, but which now meant what it meant. He put his arm around her and she let him, and they sat on the kitchen floor of the apartment they'd been in together hundreds of times, and ate birthday cake from the pan and didn't need to say anything about any of it. Gerald was not in this room. Gerald was in Charlotte's apartment, in the corner by the tall windows, doing what he did, glowing greenly and without apology in a room that had been told he was wrong for it. He was exactly right. He had always been exactly right. Sometimes the things you argue about the longest are the ones you needed most and just hadn't admitted yet. Sometimes the right answer is standing in front of you at a street market on an ordinary Sunday, looking at a lamp, and all it takes is one word from a stranger who saw something simple and said so. Sometimes the family you build is the one you make out of loyalty and time and showing up. Not the formal version, not the announced version, just the version that exists in the small actions, the regular presence, the person whose number you call first and whose voice rearranges the room. Ethan Brooks had spent 6 years building something without knowing what he was building. Charlotte Sterling had known for 4 years and carried it alone because she loved him enough to protect what they already had. They were both, in different ways, exactly wrong about how to handle it. And they had ended up here anyway, on a kitchen floor with birthday cake, in the ordinary warmth of a Tuesday that was the same as every Tuesday and entirely different from all of them. Outside, Chicago was doing what it always did. The lake was cold and gray and certain of itself. The trees had made their decisions. The market would run again on Sunday, vendors setting up in the early morning, the particular smell of old wood and the season's last warmth, the ordinary traffic of people looking for something with a story. Next Sunday they'd go back. They always went back, and whatever lamp caught Charlotte's eye this time, Ethan was going to let her buy it before she even asked. He'd learned, finally, to stop arguing about the things that were already right.